IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's Friday, and y'all know what that means. It means it is time for our Friday mailbag. Ryan is producing today. He's on the back end. He's down there listening. He's pulling up questions. He's starring questions. He's going to make sure y'all behave yourselves in the chat as best we can. I'm just kidding. We're going to have some fun today. We've got a ton of questions already queued up. Ryan's already got 38 questions starred. I had to unstar a couple because I'm not going to answer a couple of those questions, mainly from Tommy Guns. My man, we'll chat later, and I'll tell you the answers to those questions, but I'm not going to answer those publicly. I want to remind people a couple things before we get started. As Nathan Milton just said, folks, smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. You hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. If you haven't done so already, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You're definitely going to check out what we're doing there and at irishbreakdown.com, our main site. Here's another thing I need y'all to do. If you are someone who loves what Irish Breakdown is doing, but you also love what Lucky Lefty's doing, and you listening to our stuff on our podcast app. So obviously, Lucky's got their YouTube channel. You're already subscribed to that. But if you like what they're doing content-wise from a podcast standpoint, and you listen to them on the podcast, I need you to sign up to subscribe specifically to the CFB Nation channel. Now, right now, you can listen to it on the Irish Breakdown podcast feed. Over the next couple months, we're going to transition to get that off of the Irish Breakdown feed and get back to having the Irish Breakdown stuff on the Irish Breakdown channel. And then Lucky Lefty will be exclusive to CFB Nation. I just want to explain why we're doing that. Sean's going to talk about that on his show. We're doing that here. That was always the plan. But what we wanted to do when we brought Lucky Lefty over was really promote their show on, to really help it grow on the podcast side. Obviously, they're doing great work to grow on the YouTube side, but we wanted to promote the podcast side. Since CFB Nation was such a new channel, if we just had Lucky Lefty only be on there, then it would take a lot longer for them to grow their audience. I had a great meeting today with Blue Wire. The numbers for Lucky Lefty are really doing well. The number for CFB All America on the CFB Nation channel is doing really well, much better than most imported shows do. So we think it's time to start transitioning over to CFB Nation as a standalone and not import them onto the Irish Breakdown feed. The ultimate goal is, and the reason this is important is because there's always going to be a peak on how many downloads and how much money they can make when they're imported onto our channel. This is going to be the ultimate goal of getting them over there and lifting up them so they can grow more and more and more and really have that unique, different brand because they're very different than us. And that's part of the reason we brought them on is because they do spin it different. They do things different ways. Sean is people say, well, Sean's different on your show because our shows are so much different. And so you have to approach it a different way. And so love what they do. That's going to start being exclusive. So by the time we get to the fall, they're going to be exclusive to CFB Nation. You won't be able to find them on the Irish Breakdown feed. They're still going to be part of our family because CFB Nation is a part of the Irish Breakdown family, a part of the Irish Breakdown community. It's owned by Driscoll Publishing and all that kind of stuff. So definitely going to want to make sure that you do that. I just want to explain to people why we're doing that before we get started. So if you're listening via podcast, you're going to definitely want to subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast. With that being said, it's time to dive into the mailbag. And we're gonna dive into this. There's a lot of fun questions. I just want to say right now, I want to get this out to John Mayernich right away because he keeps asking me this question. Man, I haven't played Zelda in like 30 years. I used to love Zelda, but I can't remember for the life of me what my favorite weapon was. So I know you keep asking this, but I don't know. So that's how we're going to kick off today's show is with an I don't know about the Legend of Zelda. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because you keep asking that and let you know, man, I can't remember at all. I'm 44 years old. I'll be 45 next month. I have no clue what I mean, there's some games I remember. That's not one. I still remember the code for Contra. Remember that like unlimited lives, like 999 lives thing that you get for Contra. I still remember that, but most of that stuff I don't remember. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't remember what my favorite weapon was, or favorite dungeon was in Zelda. So let's get rocking and rolling with some football questions. Nathan Milton's going to get us started off with: is the talent pool lower in the transfer portal versus the 22 season? If so, do you think the portal talent will continue to decline? No, I can't say for sure. I mean, was there a Was there a Caleb Williams available in the portal? Maybe not, but I mean, Sam Hartman's got a chance to do some statistically some really excellent things in Notre Dame this year. We'll kind of see how that goes, but I don't- there may not be some of the splashy names like Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams, but there's a lot of really good players in the portal, top to bottom. How does that compare to last year? I don't know. But I'll say this, is it going to continue to decline? The only way it continues to decline is if they change the rules. If they change the rules and make the rules what they should be, what I think they should be, then that's how the numbers will decline. But I don't think it's going to decline. It's just going to be like with anything else. It's cyclical. It's like the NFL draft, right? I've been following the draft for a long time. Ryan covers it professionally. The reality is this: not every draft is the same. The quality of what's available in the draft varies from year to year. Some years it's a great draft overall. Some years it, hit or miss, but man, it's great at this position or that position. Sometimes it's just not really good at most positions. It's cyclical, and that's just going to be the same thing with recruiting. We've talked before about how the 24 class is pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as maybe the 23 class was, or maybe the 25 class might be. No reason for it. It's the way it goes sometimes. It's very cyclical, and it's going to be up and down. It's going to change from year to year, and I don't think the portal, until the rules change, I don't think the portal is going to be any different. Got a question from John A1. If Harry Heastand is the O-line coach for 2018, is Brandon Wimbush the starter for the season? I don't think so. No, I don't. I don't think so. I think Brandon's confidence was shot late in 2017, and I don't think he ever recovered. I think the Brandon Wimbush that we saw early in 2018, it was just not the same kid. And part of that was coaching. They were also trying to, I think, force Brandon into a little bit of a box that I don't think made his game well. If you look at how they used Brandon against Michigan and then how they tried to use him against Ball State and Vanderbilt, it was the same thing. They were trying to turn him into a pocket passer, and that's just not who he was. And I think that limited his ability, but I also think his confidence was shot. And it started happening under Mike Sanford, and I think it continued as he went on. So what I think would have happened is he still would have been benched. I think what would have happened is Notre Dame would have been a more balanced offense, and they weren't bad running the football in 2018. They had some good moments, but I think they would have been even better running the football, which would have made them a better team. Look, I'm not the biggest Ian Book fan in the world. Everybody knows that. But the one thing I've said many, many times is 2018 was Ian Book at his best during the regular season. And I think a better run game, a more consistent run game that season would have made him even better that season. I don't know if it would have had an impact moving forward if Coach Easton would have left again, but I think all that Coach Easton would have done was made the running game more effective. And I don't think it would have done a whole lot else regarding the quarterback position. I don't think we've seen much change. T-Guns, Crocs and Glocks. Tommy asks, if you could bring back if you could bring one player back who should have been great but was actually hampered by injury, who would it be? That's a good question. If I could bring one player back who was hampered by injury, I have to think about that one for a second. But player's career was hampered by injury. I mean, the first guy that kind of pops in my head is Javon McKinley, but I don't know if I'd bring him back because I think they're still pretty good at wide receiver. But I'm curious what Javon McKinley's career could have looked like if he didn't have the injuries he had. I'm curious. Somebody just said a good one in the chat, Malik Zaire. I don't know if I'd bring Malik back because I don't know if Malik's style of play would fit as well with what this team is trying to be. But, let's say I could put him on a different team. If I could have put Malik Zaire on like the 2017 roster or the 2018 roster, that'd have been pretty fun to watch. That'd have been pretty fun. Here's another one that somebody said in the chat that's a really good one. Jarrett Grace. That's a great one. Quinn Kibler said that one. I think Jarrett Grace would have been a big one. I've said this before. I think Jarrett Grace's career got completely derailed by the leg injury he had. It was bad leg injury. He was a kid that I think it was as a redshirt freshman, I think is when it was. He had like 40 some tackles. He really flashed. He was like 6'3 plus. He was like 240. He was athletic. He was smooth. He was physical. If you'd have had a healthy Jarrett Grace starting for Notre Dame in 2015, that team would have looked so much different because you'd have had it'd have been the best 1-2 punch up the middle that Notre Dame had in a long time because obviously Jalen was great, but that's a good one, Quinn. I like that one. I really like that one. Nathan Milt with another one says, "What players do you suspect would have been breakout players under Freeman?" Um, I'm not quite sure. I would have been breakout players under Freeman. Some vice BK. I think that's a wrong word. I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what he's asking there, Ryan. So Nathan, if you can restate that question, where it makes a little bit where I can understand it, because I don't. It's probably me, but I just don't understand it. So let's move on to the next one. John A1 says, in an offense that uses 11 personnel as its base and uses one type of receiver, what would you choose? 6'3" plus possession receivers, under 6 foot speed receivers, or 3 mid-size smooth route runners. So what you're saying, John, is if I could have an 11 personnel receiving core and I can only use one type of receiver, which one would I go with? Well, there's so many caveats that could go into that, and I won't get into too many of them, but I'll say this. The caveat is basically, well, what do you have around it? What kind of quarterback do you have? What kind of run game do you have? And so I'll use Notre Dame's specifics to answer your question. And with the way that Notre Dame plays the game, with the way they run the football, with who they have a quarterback, and Sam Hartman, a guy that likes to throw the ball down the field, a guy that's accurate, but he's not Mac Jones, he's not Jimmy Clausen from an accuracy standpoint, then I'm going with the bigger guys. I think that fits the quarterback well. I think if you start Tyler Buchner quarterback, it fits the quarterback position well. I think when you look at Tyler, give me some big receivers that can block on the perimeter. Give me some receivers that can catch some one-on-ones, can stretch the field, and that would be kind of where I would go with that one, which is kind of the possession guys, because I think they can be effective. So to me, I'd either go, the way I'd rank them is with the current personnel around it. I'd go the 3 possession receivers 1, the big guys 1, the mid-sized smooth guys next, and then under 6 foot receivers who I assume we're going to say are really fast. There's really no wrong answer, but I think it's about meshing them correctly with the current group that you have. And I think with the way that Notre Dame runs the football, with who they have at quarterback, whether it's Buchner or Hartman, I think that's the best way to go with those position groups. Quinn Kibler asks, I find the 2014 season one of the strangest of how things unfolded in the end. What other teams have you guys found ended up having an odd year, 2016 excluded? You know, if you look at different eras, I think if you look at the Brian Kelly, I think last year for Notre Dame was very odd. Like, how do you play Ohio State down to the wire? How do you absolutely blast Clemson, smash North Carolina, beat BYU convincingly, and then lose to Stanford? Like, last year was very odd how the season played out with all the injuries. 2014 obviously is one. I thought 2011 was a really weird year, a very, very strange year. You talk about the way that they lost to South Florida, because you're saying strange how they unfold. You have the loss of South Florida, where you've got your starting quarterback bench. You have like this multi-hour long break at halftime because of the weather. You come back, it just was such a weird game. I mean, even the way it started, you drive right down the field, you get the ball inside the 5, your running back fumbles, they run it back 90-some yards. You play at Michigan the next week, you've got a 24-7 halftime lead, and you blow it in the fourth quarter. Your quarterback's dropping back to throw a fade pass to Michael Floyd, probably goes for touchdown, ball game over, and he just drops it. And then the way that they hit him with that wheel route at the end, that was really weird. The USC game was, talk about strange. Notre Dame falls behind early because they're just playing bad. First drive, Matt Barkley, who was very immobile, pump fakes, Carlo Calabrese jumps for no reason whatsoever. Matt Barkley gets around him. They go down and score. They're outplaying Notre Dame. George Atkinson has a kick return in that game, which was huge. And then Notre Dame is down 24-17. They've got all the momentum back. They're driving down the field. They get down to like the 2-yard line, and they go under center, and the ball goes right through Dane Chris' hands and legs, goes into the backfield. USC picks it up, runs it back 90-some yards for a touchdown. And instead of tying the game 24-24 and then taking momentum and probably winning the game, because Notre Dame was completely outplaying USC at that point, you lose by 2 touchdowns. I mean, that whole season was flipping weird. The Stanford loss was normal. They were a better team. But then you go to the bowl game and you're completely dominating Florida State in the first half and then just completely change your game plan up in the second half. And they had like 4 freshmen starting on the offensive line. You're destroying them in the first half. They didn't really change a lot. Notre Dame just backed off their attack and allowed them to come back. It was such a weird year. That was probably a weirder year than 2014 to me. You talk about who and like 2014, like here's the thing, 2014 was going pretty good until a bunch of injuries set in. Drew Tranquil gets hurt, Sheldon Day's banged up late in the year, Jerron Jones gets banged up late in the year. You had just so many. That was the year. No, did Sean Crawford get hurt that year? Did he play that year? I forget which one, but you had so many weird injuries late in the year. You had linemen getting hurt. All of a sudden, you're going from having a starting defensive line of a bunch of future NFL guys. You're having Jacob Matuska playing a bunch of snaps and a bunch of the freshmen playing a bunch of snaps against USC, and you get blown out. So the same team that took Florida State down to the wire and looked great early in the year can't beat Northwestern and Louisville at home. But you can point to a bunch of injuries on that team. The 2011 season doesn't make any sense. Think about who you had on that team, y'all. You had Sear Wood, Jonas Gray. Jonas doesn't get hurt till late in the year. He gets hurt against BC, so he was there all year. He was playing for him. You had Michael Floyd at receiver. You had Tyler Eifert at tight end. You had Theo Riddick and TJ Jones at wide receiver. You had Sear Wood at running back. Defensively, you had Manti on that team. You had Harrison Smith on that team. Robert Blanton on that team. Darius Fleming on that team. That team was on top of Lewis Nix and Aaron Lynch and Cap. And you had so many future NFL players on that team. You went 8-5 with that team. It was that year to me was more weird than 2014. 2014 was a bad year, but it wasn't strange. It was Brian McGorder stinks and teams eventually figured him out and they had a mess of injuries. That's really what it came down to for me. It wasn't strange. It was just bad. 2016 wasn't strange. It was just bad. 2011 was strange. Just the way they lost games was just like, what is going on here? It is the strangest year I've ever been a part of covering Notre Dame. Okay, was there a player who had a bad career under BK who might have had a great career under Marcus Freeman? Well, I'll say this, like there are, you could go any big time defensive player. And I don't want to blame this directly on Kelly. It's Kelly's fault because he hired the coach and kept the coach, right? And that's the job of a head coach. But pick any really good defensive player under Brian Van Gorder and insert them to now. And I've said this before. If Jalen Smith plays for Mike Elko, Clark Lee, or Marcus Freeman, he's one of the most productive linebackers ever to play the game. There's just no question in my mind. But he was completely wasted under Brian Van Gorder. So you could say the same thing about Sheldon Day. You could say the same thing about Kavari Russell playing in this defense right now would be pretty good. I think Cole Luke's one. Cole Luke just continued to get worse and worse every year. And I think a big part of that was Brian Van Gorder. And he's another one. I think Max Redfield's one. And you put Max Redfield in a different defense. I think Marcus Freeman would have had he would have been able to connect better with Max and kind of rein Max in a little bit and get Max focus on things. Max was a really smart kid and he just didn't always make the best decisions. I think Coach Freeman would have related with him a little bit better in that regard and would have helped him make some better decisions. So yeah, pick any defensive player in 2014. I don't know if there's any offensive guys because I just don't think that there's any necessarily huge change right now when it comes to the coaching style where, oh gosh, this would have been so much better. But like Phil Dracovic, I don't know if Phil Dracovic would have been any different under the current regime. He still would have coached under Tommy Rees, the same guy that he coached under before. So I don't know if that would have turned out any different. I think the defensive side of the ball is where we would have seen, to me, a lot of differences. John A1 says Ben Minich is reportedly having an impactful spring so far. What would you project to be his freshman year ceiling? What's the reasonable expectation this year for Ben? So I want to. This is gonna. I'm trying to figure out the right way to do this because I'm not doing this in any way to disparage Ben Minich because I graded Ben as a 4-star recruit, but I think we need to pump the brakes on hyping players up because of what's said about them in press conferences when we don't see it. Uh, yes, I get where it's coming from. The buzz is coming from things that Chris O'Leary has said, things DJ Brown has said, but they need to say those things because they need Ben to play right now because they don't have anybody else. That's not meant to be disrespectful to Ben Minich. I just know when I saw him, I have questions about if he's physically ready to play right now, as which is the case with some of the other freshmen. He still didn't look as certain with what he was doing. Now, I highly doubt that in 2 practices since then, all of a sudden he's gone from that to light the world on fire. I think what this is smart coaching by Chris O'Leary and smart leadership by DJ Brown saying, hey, look, we need this kid. Let's build this kid up. And we see some things from him in drills and things where he's maybe not having to think as much, where he looks pretty good. So let's really push this kid and give him some confidence and really push him up. So my ceiling for him is not going to change because of comments made in a press conference. And I would encourage all of you to take that same stance. Like when we see it on the field, sure, that's great. And so far in spring, I haven't, in the limited amount I've seen, I haven't seen anything to make me think otherwise. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It could very well be happening. My point is simply that we should never base our opinions off of what coaches say at press conferences. That's again, not an insult. It's just one of those things where you say that's not a great gauge. And we have a long history of coaches saying things like this, and it's not exactly how it pans out. So I would encourage you all not to get to read too much into that. I think what I would say is we've said this all along. Ben's going to have a chance to play if they don't make a change. He's going to have to play. They literally don't have anybody else after DJ Brown at safety if Ben Minich doesn't play. It's unless you're going to put walk-ons on the field. And look, like Isaiah Dunn, he's done some nice things this spring. I've seen him make plays. I hope that they are able to find another answer and then Ben can redshirt. I really do. I think Ben Minich is a 5-year player. I think him and Adon Schuler can be 5-year players. Most skilled players aren't that way. At the same time, there's a chance that he could just be too important on special teams not to redshirt. I mean, I could see that from Ben Minich. I've said this before. Ben Minich is going to be a special teams captain someday. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a defensive captain too. He's just going to be a really good special teams player in his career. That's the floor for Ben Minich. The ceiling is he becomes an impactful, like 3-year starter type of guy. I think Ben Minich could be that kind of guy. I'm just not jumping into the whole let's jump on the bandwagon because of a comment made at a press conference. That's all I'm saying about him. Other than that, I'll say this. I hope what they're saying turns out to be true. Because if Ben Minich is literally ready to be a difference maker, an impact player as a freshman, that goes a long way towards solidifying the safety depth chart. It really does. It would be very helpful if that was true. I'm just not ready to jump on that bandwagon simply because of what was said at a press conference. If we just seen him just lighting the world on fire at practice, sure, let's do it. Let's roll. Let's jump on that bandwagon. But I need to see it. And the things that I've heard from sources are that they love his upside and his potential, but just right now, he's like a lot of the freshmen. He's swimming right now. And maybe that light goes on in the fall, but I think that this is more just pumping a kid up who needs a boost of encouragement from a coach and a veteran. And I think they're both doing the right thing. I have no beef with what they're saying. I love that they're saying it. I think they need to encourage him because they may need him. Because even if you move Clarence Lewis, you're still one injury away from needing Ben Minich to play. And so it's important. It's important. And so John Klimek, who I'm great to see you in the chat again, man. I haven't seen you in a while. So John Klimek says, so I shouldn't get my Ben Popeye Spaminich tattoo just yet. Yeah, I would encourage you not to do that. I would encourage you never to do that, John. I don't care if he ends up being a first-round draft pick, but if you're dead set on it, I would definitely maybe wait a year before I jump onto that bandwagon. T-Guns, Crocs, and Glock says, do you think Notre Dame's trajectory would have been any different if they had won the Bush Push game? I don't. I don't think so. I think that might have I mean, that would have allowed them to maybe play in a better game. I think Notre Dame has a good chance of playing Texas in the national title game. I just don't see that defense stopping Vince Young. I just don't. And as much as I love that offense, I don't know if they could have scored enough to beat Texas. I really don't. So maybe they'd have played for a title, and maybe they would have had a competitive game. That doesn't change. I mean, they were preseason, I think, like number one on Sports Illustrated. I think that next year, Sporting News, one of them had a preseason number one. They still would have been the same team in 2006, and Charlie would have had the same problems as a coach that he would have had otherwise. Because here's the thing, like the way that I would say it would change the trajectory of it is like, let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame beat Alabama in 2012. That would have changed Notre Dame's trajectory because it would have given Brian Kelly a little bit more validity, but it would have allowed them to recruit better in spite of their coach. Because if you go out and win a title and you beat Bama doing so, maybe the Bama dynasty doesn't become what it becomes. Who knows? But I think it would have given Notre Dame a big recruiting boost. Charlie didn't need a recruiting boost. I mean, they recruited at an elite level the next couple of years. And so I don't know if it would have helped recruiting all that much. He still would have made poor assistant coaching decisions. And I think those and he still had a very flawed philosophy as a head coach. He still had a very scheme-driven head football coach mentality, and they didn't teach kids how to line up and how to step properly and line up properly and tackle and block and run routes the right way. They still were a scheme-driven team that their kids didn't know how to play the game. And I don't think that changes if they beat USC. I really don't. I think the only thing that would have changed was that team would have been considered better. I think they would have played, and I think they would have given Texas a game because I think that team could score on Texas. I just don't think they could have scored enough to win. And I don't think they would have forced Texas to go on a game winner at the end like they did. I think they probably win by like a touchdown in a game that's very back and forth the whole game, but Texas was the better team. And it comes down to it. Texas had a better defense and maybe didn't look like it against USC, but yeah, I think 8 NFL guys on that team that next year on that defense, next couple of years off that defense, and Michael Huff and some guys like that. So I don't think it would have changed Notre Dame's trajectory. I think it would have changed the how that season was perceived, but I don't think it changes the trend. Now, if Notre Dame, let's just say hypothetically they played Texas and somehow beat Texas, I still don't think it changes the trajectory of Notre Dame. If anything, it might actually hurt it. To be completely honest with you, like this is going to sound weird now, and I would take this trade. I would because winning a title is worth it to me. But let's just say they won a title that year. I think. Well, there's two ways to look at it. Now, some second thought top pops in my head. Number one is Charlie's still going to make the same mistakes that he made, and he's still going to have the flawed process as a coach that he had. But if he wins a title, you're not getting rid of him in 2000. I mean, it'd be so much harder to get rid of him in 2009 at Notre Dame if he wins a title, where then maybe you miss your Brian Kelly window. Maybe you do. Does that mean you get somebody better? Does that mean you get somebody worse? I don't know the answers to that. So I think that would have changed Notre Dame's trajectory a lot. Maybe for the worse, maybe for the better. I really don't know. The other thought of that is what if Charlie does that and all of a sudden Charlie ends up getting back to the NFL in a couple years? So after 2006, some NFL team offers Charlie a ton of money and he leaves. How does that change their trajectory? That's another interesting question. So I think the only thing that would have changed it is if they would have gone and beaten Texas, and I just don't think they would have. I don't think they would have beaten Texas. I really don't. Johnny One says Ryan's Game of Thrones entrance. Ryan Roberts, first of his name, ruler of draft analysis, recruiting analyst of America, and background producer of Friday Mailbags. Okay, I dig that. I can dig that. All right, what do we got next here? We got Call Me Ty. Says he has a two-parter, looks like. Says Notre Dame has played these home games with teams like Michigan, Oklahoma, Texas, Michigan State, Northwestern, Miami, Georgia, and Ohio State, and never swept the series. Part two says, "What series would you have been the what series would have been the most impactful other than the Georgia because that one would have been obvious and Notre Dame didn't even and win one of those games." Well, I think the one that would have been most impactful would have been Ohio State to me. I They didn't have a home and home with Miami. That was just part of the ACC schedule, and they'll have more series with them. They had, I think, in a stretch of a few years, they had like so you had them at home in 16 and on the road in 17. It wasn't a traditional home and home, so that's a little bit different. But to me, it's Ohio State. If you'd have beat Ohio State in Columbus last year and beat them again this year, I mean, you now become the Midwest power, in my opinion. You just do. I I don't care what happened the rest of the year. And if you beat them last year and then beat them again this year, look what that has done to perception of Michigan. And I would argue that Notre Dame's a better brand than Michigan. I know it's going to cause Michigan fans to lose their minds, but I think Notre Dame is a better brand than Michigan because Notre Dame's been better for longer in recent history. And I think that Notre Dame has a more likable coach than Michigan does. But look at how people are perceiving Michigan right now after beating Ohio State 2 years in a row. If Notre Dame does that, that changes things dramatically. So, you took Georgia out of the equation. That obviously would have been big. But I think Ohio State would be the next one. I don't think Oklahoma does change as much. I don't think Michigan changes much. Texas again. Texas isn't very good. I don't think that changes much for either team. Michigan State, Northwestern, don't care about that one. Miami, Georgia, we talked about. So yeah, of those, the top three is Georgia. I mean, excuse me, Ohio State's still won no matter what to me because it's the regional power thing. It's Ohio State, it's Georgia, it's of this group, it's Michigan, then it's Texas, and then Oklahoma would be how I'd rank those top five when talking about like which one would have changed which one would have had the biggest impact. I think that's the order I would go in. Yeah, see, I knew him. Antoine, my Michigan guy, says, "Are you dreaming again, Brian? Wake up!" See, I told you. I told you Michigan fans won't agree, but that's just the reality of it, in my opinion. Indy Estimate Trucking LLC says, in your opinion, who had the best skill set ability coming out of high school? Torrey Hunter Jr., DeVaris Daniels, Rico Flores Jr., Chris Brown, Lorenzo Styles, or Rama McKnight? That's a good one. Of that order, I would go DeVaris Daniels 1. I thought if DeVaris had a better attitude, I think and not gotten in trouble, I think DeVaris is on the verge of becoming a star at Notre Dame. I really do. I mean, if you look at kind of what he had done the year before, he was the number 2 to TJ Jones. He had 49 catches, 745 yards, 7 touchdowns as a number 2. He had a really good game against Alabama the year before in the title game. He showed that he could be a really good player. And then if you'd have put DeVaris on a team with Everett Golson the next year, because DeVaris was a pretty good deep ball guy, even though he wasn't a burner, he was a good route runner and he could get open deep. Him and Everett would have been a really fun combination in 2014. You saw what they did in 2012 when Everett was a redshirt freshman. DeVaris was a really good player, and then by the end of the year, you look at what him and DeVaris were doing at the end of the year. I mean, think about the Pitt game, some of the big plays he made in the Pitt game. He gets hurt against BC, misses the next 2 games, comes back for the championship game, has 6 catches for 115 yards. Last 2 full games together with Everett and DeVaris, he had 7 catches for 86 against Pitt, 6 catches for 115 against Alabama. I think he would have been really dynamic in 2014. So I'm going to go with DeVaris number 1. And I loved him coming out. So I'm going DeVaris number 1. I'm going to go with coming out of high school. I'd probably go with Rama number 2 because I think Rama was really good before the knee injury. He was a different player post knee injury than he was pre knee injury. If you remember, he was a guy that could do stuff after the catch early in his career. I still remember a nice little tunnel. I think it was BYU had a little tunnel screen that he took for a touchdown. So Rama number 2. I'd go probably Lorenzo Styles 3, Torrey Hunter 4, Rico Flores Jr. 5, and then Chris Brown 6 is how I would rank those 6. That's how I would go with it. Which previous Notre Dame players have done the most to support the program since leaving? I mean, it's really unfair for me to for me to say that because I don't know what everyone has done. So I won't say which ones have done the most because I think that is disrespectful to players who maybe are doing things behind the scenes that I don't see. But of what I can see, of what I know publicly, obviously Brady Quinn has done a lot for the program. That's the first one that stands out. This fun collective and just promoting him just in all the different things he does. You've got uh, Pat Eilers has donated. He came back to help the team coach. He was making a lot of money. Came back to help the team coach. He has let's see. I think it's the secondary coach that he has basically. He's the that it's named after him because he's given a lot of money. He doesn't do a lot of things, where maybe we're seeing him publicly like Brady Quinn, but financially he's doing a lot to support the program. Jerome Bettis has done a lot to support the program. Tim Brown is a very vocal supporter of Notre Dame as an institution. There's some other players that I think Byron Spruill has done some things in the background. He's a guy that's done a lot of things, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to think of some other guys that have been very, very vocal supporters of the program over the years that have really had a big impact. But those are the guys that kind of off the top of my head jump out at me. I've heard that Tom Carter's trying to get into some things to support the program. I'd love to see something like that. So I mean, if I sat down and thought about it, Reggie Brooks came back and worked at Notre Dame. He worked for different aspects to help promote Notre Dame. So Reggie's done a lot for the institution. He's now doing things with Coach Holtz on the background. So Reggie'd be another one that I would say I think has done a lot for Notre Dame. And there's so many others, and I don't mean any disrespect to those guys that are doing that. It's just I don't see it. I don't hear about it as much. There's former players that are really did well financially that have given a lot of money to the school to help support the school. So those are guys that I would but I don't know about all those, and I don't know some of the ones I do know. I'm not sure if that's something that they would want made public. But those are the guys that I think are publicly. I think we can talk about and say these guys are doing a lot for the school. We got a super chat there from Jim DeMatteis. Jim, thank you very, very much. Haven't seen you in the chat for a while either. Glad to see you back. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. Let's get to something next here. We got from Cookie. Cookie says, so everyone has Diggs and Estime slated as RBs 1A and 1B. What are the odds for Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, or Jabron Payne to become a clear number one this season? Personally, I want to use all of them. I think the only way that one of those three guys can become number one, especially the clear number one, is if there's a lot of injuries. And that's not to say that those guys aren't absolutely exceptional talents. I would argue that the guy with the most, I'd be curious what Ryan thinks about this. You can kind of give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down when I make this statement, Ryan. But I would argue that just on God-given ability, take out experience, take out technical, ability where he is mentally knowing the offense, just God-given ability. The most talented running back on the roster this year is going to be Jeremiah Love. Ryan agrees, just physically talented. But But being physically talented doesn't make him a better running back right now than Audric Estime, who is 3 years, 2-3 years older, knows the offense, is physically stronger, is just ready to be more effective right now. And so, same thing with Logan Diggs. I see those guys all battling to get playing time on special teams. I see them all battling to get some snaps late in the games. I see them battling to become that number 3 back because there will be a number 3 back. But those guys becoming like the guy this season, I think that's going to require legit injuries to happen. I just don't. Other than that, I don't see that being something that can happen this year without barring injury. There's just the older guys are just too good, to be honest with you. They're just too good. Got John A1 with another question. When is the last time you witnessed kids playing neighborhood football? Growing up, I remember this being a daily thing for me and my friends, making up rules, sideline pop, etc. That's a good question, John. I can't tell you the last time I saw. I rarely see kids playing, period. We live in a pretty decent sized neighborhood, and I know for a fact there's a lot of kids because every Halloween there's a mess of kids in our neighborhood. Where Ange and I live, we live out in Granger, and where we live, there is like literally you can look out our front porch and there's a street, and then our across the street neighbor, and then behind our across street neighbor is a park. And in that park is like a swing set, and it's like there's like a soccer net, there's a tennis court, there's basketball hoops, and I rarely see kids over there. Rarely. You'll see some kids on the swing, but it's like a couple little kids. It's just hardly ever over there. I don't think kids play outside as much anymore, at least in my neighborhood. So I'd have to say the last time I saw kids playing neighborhood football is probably my nephew, being back in Virginia with my nephew, and that's more of just kind of with family. So um, yeah, I it's a good question, but I it doesn't happen. It's sad. I don't think it's a good thing, but yeah, I just don't think it happens. I don't see it a whole lot. It's an interesting question. Interesting question. Notre Dame 2164. Dude, I think someone hacked my YouTube account. That cookie person was me. I thought that picture looked familiar, but I don't. Yeah, that's kind of strange. I don't know. Like, did somebody like steal your picture? And that's wild, man. That's wild. Did they change your account name, or so did your wife do that as a joke to you? Does your daughter do that? Somebody's messing with you, dude. So yeah, but if somebody hacked your account, they most likely would have changed your password and you wouldn't be able to log in. I think somebody in your family's messing with you. To find out who that is, my friend. There's no doubt. All right, T guns, Crocs, and Glocks. Brian, you've mentioned several times that you're not Catholic. In my mind, sharing, if you don't mind sharing, which denomination are you, and what are its main differences from Catholicism? Ryan, same for you. And then, is there a second part to that, Ryan? I saw the dot dot dot. So no second part. Um, I don't view myself as part of a denomination. I'm not going to get into why. I'm not a huge fan of denominations. I think the main thing is having been a youth pastor in a denomination and kind of grown up and been around different denominations, whether it's as being forced to go to church as a kid or the denomination that was a part of the high school that I went to, whatever the case may be. I find denominations tend, in my opinion, just my opinion, denominations tend to be too much about the creeds and the different aspects that make a denomination unique. I've had too many instances where, like when I was a youth pastor, I would have these discussions with people in the church, and their answer would be, "Well, that's what the denomination believes," and then they would point to the creeds and the traditions of the denomination. And even when I'm like quoting scripture and like in context and showing them the Greek and all of that to show that what we're teaching in the church is not correct, but that's we're a Nazarene denomination or we're a whatever Methodist or we're Baptist and that's what we believe. It just never sat well with me. I want the Word of God to teach me what it means, and what it means for me and what the truth is, whether I like it or not. And that's just kind of where I get it from. So I go to a non-denominational church. That in itself can be a little bit problematic as well. We have a lot of problems in the American church. But sometimes the non-denominational churches will get into sort of they want to be non-denominational for the opposite reason, the polar opposite reason. They want to have no creeds. They want to just be that whole seeker sensitive thing, which I'm not a huge fan of the way that it's used in current context. I want a church that this is what the word of God says. This is who Jesus was. This is what he did. And this is what it means for you in your life. And this is what you're called to do. There's an expression we have. I'm preach for just a second and we'll move on. There's this thing in our modern society where it says, Jesus will take you for who you are, accept you for who you are. And that is such a true statement. The problem, however, is that we are not teaching enough people that says, but true salvation and the sanctification that follows mean that once you leave that salvific experience, you're not the same person anymore. So if I'm an alcoholic or if I'm cheating on my wife or if I'm abusing my wife or I'm stealing from people and I come to Jesus and he accepts me for who I am and then forgives me of my sins, that doesn't mean that I have a blank slate and I can just keep doing whatever the heck I want to do. And just, I've got my eternal life insurance policy of this prayer that I was told to repeat. And that means everything is all good. No, if you come to an encounter with Jesus and you leave and you're the same freaking person, you need to rethink what that encounter actually did for you and whether or not you have true salvation. That's my opinion. That's just kind of where I come from. And so that's my 2 cents on it. And how that's different from Catholicism, honestly, T-Guns, I've never been to a Catholic church. My wife has a far more I'd say anti-Catholic, but just not a big fan of Catholicism because she grew up in a Catholic church. But it's like with others, it's rituals and mass and things like that. I I have Catholic friends who are, man, they are so strong in their faith, and others that aren't because of certain things about Catholicism. But I could point to that, and every denomination has people that are like that. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But I've been in all types of different denominations. I was a youth pastor in the Nazarene church. There were things when I got hired to say, look, just so you know, I'm never teaching this because I don't believe in it. You have to understand that. And it'll say, hey, if it comes up in a thing, and you just refer them to the main pastor. But I've been Baptist churches, all of it. I'm just the denomination thing is just sort of not a thing that I don't really believe in. And there's like supposed books of the Bible that the Catholic Church that uses that I don't agree with. I think historically speaking, I just don't think they hold up the same test of time, so to speak, that the others do. There's just a lot of things there that I have that I don't really care to get into here, but that's just my 2 cents on it. But I'm not anti-Catholic at all. I never went to a Catholic church. The only time I've ever really been in a Catholic church is for funerals. Um, so I really am not someone to speak on that. I can just tell you what I believe. I can tell you what the Bible teaches me, and what my time in seminary gave me a very good understanding on why I don't like seminaries, but also where my faith needs to be, and what it means, what it truly is, and what it means for my life. So I don't mind sharing that at all. I'm not preaching at you too much, but I'm just telling you like what I believe and why I believe it. So that's where I'm at. So yeah, and Nathan Milton, no, cheating is not okay. It's not okay at all, whether in any context. So anyway, Tom Connor asks, with Deuce Knight at the top of the list, how hard is it to adjust to a lefty QB? I think this is a little overrated. Honestly, I don't think it's that challenging. I think we saw that in 2015. I mean, you went from Malik Zaire to Deshaun Kaiser in the middle of a game, and there weren't any issues with guys catching the ball. I think that with anything, if you got reps, if you get a lot of reps with a guy, you could go from a right-hander to a right-hander, and they throw the ball completely different, and it's going to have a greater impact on you than going from righty to lefty when the guys throw the ball similarly. So I don't think it's a huge adjustment. I think it takes a little getting used to. The time where it can be a problem is like when you first put a lefty on the roster. It may take a little getting used to, because here's the one difference. Number one is the ball comes out differently. So if I'm throwing to the left, the ball is going to come out at a different angle. Where I'm finding the ball is going to be different. Whereas a righty, I got to look back a little bit more. If I'm breaking the left, where a lefty, it's going to kind of be there, and then it's flipped on the right side. And the other thing is the ball spins in a different direction. If a righty snaps it, the ball's going to spin this way. If a lefty snaps it, the ball's going to spin that way. It's got a reverse rotation. But if the ball is thrown similarly, then I don't think it matters. I think they'll get used to it pretty quickly. It takes work, but that's true of any quarterback. It takes work to get used to them. And I think that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I don't think it's a big adjustment for me. I really don't. It's like anything. If you get reps, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. Let's move on to the next question here, Ryan. John A1 has, how many Notre Dame teams, if any, produced and played to their full potential in the modern era? That team is as good as it possibly could have been. Maybe 2005. Thoughts? I think the 05 team, for the most part, maxed out how good it could be. I think that was close. I think the 2012 team maxed out how good it could have been in the regular season anyway. I think we all know kind of what happened sort of in the bowl game, what we found out, what the team was going through, which we didn't find out till later going into the bowl game. But I think that 2012 team did a pretty good job of maxing out its talent. I think the trying to think back to through to that. I mean, Davey had a year. What was the year that Notre Dame played Oregon State in the Fiesta Bowl? Was that 99 or 2000? I forget which year it was. I thought that team got the most out of what they could do. I mean, let me look. I think it was 2000. It might have been 99. I might be getting this backwards, but it was the 2000 team. They lost to number one Nebraska in overtime. If you never watched that game, that was a really fun game. And Notre Dame lost, but yeah, like Julius Jones had a 100-yard kick return in that game. You had Joey Getherall had a punt return for a touchdown that game. Notre Dame battled that Nebraska team really well. opened the season off with a win over number 25 Texas A&M, beat them pretty convincingly. Went out the next week, had a great game against Nebraska, beat Purdue at home the next week. That Purdue team, pardon me, was ranked number 13 when they played. That was a really good football team. That was Drew Brees' senior season at Purdue. They won that game 23-21. Then they go on the road the next week against number 23 Michigan State, lose by 6. Then they rattle off, I think it was at 7. I'm looking at it now, 7 straight wins. Beat West Virginia, beat Navy, beat Stanford, Air Force, BC, Rutgers, went on the road and beat USC. Julius Jones had I think that's the game where he had a really big game. And then they played Oregon State in the bowl game and got annihilated. But like, if I remember correctly, Matt LaVecchio played. It didn't Arnez Battle. What game did Arnez Battle get hurt in? Let me find this real quick. So he started the season against A&M, and I'm trying to see here. I'm trying to remember when Arnez Battle got hurt that season, but it was very early, and they played the whole season with Matt LaVecchio at quarterback, who was just not good. And I mean, no disrespect to Matt LaVecchio, but he was just not good. And yeah. And when Arnez came back, I can't remember what happened, but they played Matt LaVecchio a big chunk of that season, and he was not good. And for that team to go 9-2 and make it the Fiesta Bowl and beat the teams they beat, I mean, beat Drew Brees, beat a ranked A&M team, for them to get the Fiesta Bowl, that was as good as that team was going to be, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's as good of a team as they were going to be, in my view. There aren't, and most teams don't reach their full potential. I mean, in recent years, we've seen 18 Clemson was pretty much played to its potential. 19 LSU pretty much played to its potential. 20 Alabama. You'll get a team here or there. TCU this past year absolutely played to their full potential. It doesn't happen often because you're going to have injuries and you're going to have somebody doesn't play as well and you're going to have all these different things. But Notre Dame underachieved. There's a difference between not playing to your potential and underachieving. And Notre Dame's had a lot of underachieving seasons the last 30 years where they should have been better, but not a ton that I would say played to its full potential, to be honest with you. And that's been part of my issue. Irish Blood said, how was the anniversary dinner? It was great. My wife loves going to Ruth's Chris, so I was able to make a reservation there and have fun with her and have some leftovers that I need to heat up today to finish those off. But no, it was nice. And, get a chance to spend time with my wife. We got a booth at Ruth's Chris. They don't have a lot of those. And they had like a sign. They gave us like a special dessert. And, and I had a gift card, so it didn't sting as much, which was nice. So didn't hurt my wallet as much as it would if I didn't have a gift card. I don't think I've ever been to Ruth's Chris without a gift card. So I don't know if you've ever been there. That's a really expensive place to eat food. And so it's not really a place I'm comfortable going to and just paying out of pocket the entire thing. I just don't really roll like that, to be honest with you. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And so we were going to go out to the mall afterwards. And 15 years of marriage is supposedly what I was told by my mom, a couple other people, that 15 years of marriage is what you're supposed to do is buy a timepiece for your spouse. And so I bought Angela a new Apple Watch last night. And so we were going to go do that on after dinner, but we got done with dinner too late and the mall closes like 8:00. So we ended up hanging out last night and then going out to dinner afterwards last night. Went to a place called Papa Vino's in town, which I really like. I started going there like last year. I'd never really been there before, and it's pretty good. It's an Italian place. And I got the manicotti, which is really good. Enjoyed it very much. And they give you just a fresh baked bread, like just a loaf of bread beforehand, which I love. I absolutely love. So, but yeah, thank you for asking. And thanks for all that. We had so many people reaching out on Twitter and different places wishing us happy anniversary. I really appreciate that and really appreciate y'all's understanding of why we didn't do a show on Wednesday. And Tyler asks, how many years have we been together and then married? We've been married for 15 years. We dated for less than a year before we got married. And that's what happens when you don't meet your soulmate, I guess, until you're old. I was like 29 when I got married. But yeah, we met about a little less than a year before we got married. We got engaged in December and got married in April. So yeah, it was pretty quick. Pretty quick. Dumbest decision she's ever made, best one I've ever made. So that's the way I look at it. And I'm very happy that she made that dumb decision. But Yeah, I'm very blessed. I have a great wife. I'm a very supportive wife. I mean, she designed the logo. She actually came up with the name Irish Breakdown because when we first started the Irish Maven thing, I hated that name. And I didn't want to name my podcast and stuff that name because I wanted it to always be independent. And she's the one that came up with the name Irish Breakdown. So yeah, I she's she's where I'm at rock. I love that lady. So yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for asking. John Mayerner says the Mount Rushmore of defensive players in the NFL. Who you got? Okay, so let's go with defensive lineman, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, and a DB. A DB. There's four, right? On Mount Rushmore, there's four people. So let's go corner and a safety. My D lineman, I don't know why, but I've just always kind of viewed Deacon Jones as like just I don't know, like a when I think of D line in the history of D line play, I always think of Deacon Jones. I don't know why, I just always have. So he'd be my D line on the Mount Rushmore of defensive players. My linebacker would be Dick Butkus. Just again, when you think linebacker play, you think Dick Butkus. When I think of cornerbacks, I mean, boy, this is a tough one because there's been so many great corners over the years. I'd probably put that's a that's I tell you what, you know what I'm gonna put on? I'm gonna put Daryl Green on there because he played for a long time and he's supposedly just a great guy. I'm gonna probably have him on there. Dion's probably the best corner I've ever seen, but I just can't put Dion on there. And then the last one at safety is going to be my personal bias coming through, and it's Steve Atwater. I gotta get a Bronco on there, guys. You know I can't not have a Bronco on there. And Steve Atwater was my favorite safety of all time. So anyone that can knock out Christian Okoye the way he did on Monday Night Football, while mic'd up, deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of defensive players. So yeah, and offensive players. I mean, you know who I would have on that one, right? It's John Elway, quarterback. It's Barry Sanders at running back. It's Jerry Rice at wide receiver. Offensive line would be the one I'd be a little unsure of who should be on that one. Probably Orlando Pace. Probably be on that for me. Him or maybe Jonathan Ogden. Just trying to think of some different guys, but that would be mine for offensive side of the ball. So yeah, good questions today. Fun questions today. David Lowe. Has our offensive line recruiting declined since the Rudolph hire? I see we have a 3-star committed and another unranked lineman in your article a few days ago. Well, if you're going to base it off of just recruiting rankings, David, then yes, it's declined because recruiting rankings it's not as good. But I will repeat again, I think just looking at recruiting rankings is a terrible way to look at it. Because you know who else was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame? This guy named Joe Alt. He was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame. He turned out to be pretty good. Nick Martin was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame. Mike McGlinchey was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame. Rivals thought that Liam Eichenberg was a 3-star until he played in the All-Star game and dominated. So I just don't care about rankings. The other part of it has it declined? It's way too early to tell. Ryan and I have talked about this. I have some concerns and some question marks, but I just don't know enough about some of these players and haven't had a chance to break down game film to the point where I could say definitively, yeah, it's a problem. So, I mean, I'm willing to admit that I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned that they're not like I don't understand. Here's an example for me, right? Like Ryan and I have talked about this a little bit. I don't understand how you're recruiting Aiden Lynch and bringing him on a visit, but yet you're not going to recruit Caleb Brewer hard anymore. Makes zero sense to me. And I understand why you like Anthony Knapp because you evaluated him in person multiple times, but then I don't understand why. Oh yeah, Ryan just texted me. Caleb Brewer's a 3-star too, so David probably doesn't like him as a player. But so why do you recruit him, but then not give Caleb Brewer the opportunity to prove himself to you? It's like because you didn't work him out. So there's some things that I question so far, but I want to try to give Coach Rudolph the benefit of the doubt and give him more than a month or 2 months to figure it out. But so far, I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm not really ready to say it's declined. It's way too early to say that it's declined at this point in time. I want to give it more time. I'm going to give it more time, but I will be honest with you and say that yes, I do have some concerns. I do have some concerns. And David says, I have no problem with 3-stars. I just know that Notre Dame is known for being elite on the O-line. Yes, again, but some of the elite players they've had were not very highly ranked guys. All right. I mean, that's just the reality. Zach Martin was, I don't think, a Rivals 250 guy. He was a 4-star. He wasn't a Rivals 250 guy. Ronnie Stanley was not a top 100 recruit. He's not barely a top 200 recruit. Liam Eichenberg was barely a top 200 recruit because of how low Rivals ranked him. We've seen this before, right? We've seen a lot of these guys turn. Joe Alt was a 3-star. A lot of these guys were not highly ranked guys that turned out to be stars. It's the talent and the projection, not the stars. And if you think that you're just going to recruit highly ranked linemen and that's going to equal great team, that's just not how it works, in my opinion. So I'm willing to give him some time, but my early returns are, yeah, I'm concerned, but I'm just trying to be a little bit patient on this one. I'm going to super chat from Chino Aguirre. Thank you, Chino, very, very much. He says, just showing some love and appreciation. God bless all. Go Irish. Appreciate you, Chino, very, very much. Very, very much. Means that a lot. I did want to say something real quick, too. Yesterday, late in the show, we had something from Kirk Anderson. He had a super chat that we didn't get to. Kirk, if you're in the show today, please throw that question in again. I'd love to answer it for you without a super chat. And then also, Chill2177 asked a question, and I don't know why, but whenever I see that name, I say Chili, and I don't know why, but it's Chill. So I apologize for that, Chill, that I got that incorrect. So those two just popped in my head as I was as Chino was giving us thanks and love and appreciation, because I appreciate y'all too. I appreciate you, Chino, and I appreciate all you others. And when I don't get a name right, I do apologize. There's no disrespect intended on that, and that's why we always say, if I get your name wrong, let me know, and I'll fix it. I'll definitely fix it. So let's move on to some more. John A1 says, how many Notre Dame teams? We actually got this one already. It's about the full potential one. T-Guns, Crocs and Glocks. What is your guys' favorite hobby that you get to do the most? Which one you like to be able to do more often? I don't really have a lot of hobbies, to be honest with you. I work all the time. I mean, I wish I had more hobbies. My wife and I have talked about this. I want to join a bowling league. I love to bowl. I was a really good bowler when I was a kid. And we bowled 1 year of our marriage. We were in a league, and it was a lot of fun. I ended up with like a 190 average. It wasn't very good, but like I was like 130 after the first month and a half because I hadn't bowled in a long time. And yeah, I would like to be like in a bowling league. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a blast. My wife and I would enjoy doing that, but I still have time for it. I'd love to get out to the gun range more. I don't have time to do that. I haven't been in month and a half, 2 months, which is just way too long to be out there. So I'd like to do that more. That's become a hobby. I like to practice and be good at it. I think anyone that's going to own a firearm needs to, take gun safety very seriously. You need to practice and get good at it and make sure that you know how to use it and all that kind of stuff. But it's also something enjoyable for me. I didn't think it would be when I first bought a pistol, but it is. I enjoy it. And getting out in the fresh air, and because the range that we go to, the range that I belong to is actually an outdoor range. So when I go to the range, it's outside. And so that's a lot of fun. But just hobbies. I mean, I used to love to read. I still don't have the time for it. Well, I need to make the time for it. I like I have like 5 bookshelves of books, all different types of things. I used to love to read. I just don't have time for it, to be honest with you. Yeah. So that's one. I want to bring up one at the bottom, Ryan. It just came up because I forgot to mention this earlier. Tommy Gunn's question. He says, Brian, what are your Easter traditions? So they've changed over time. When I was a kid, it was Easter egg hunting and getting candy. And one of the things my mom would do is, you guys remember those, like, it's not like the baseball almanacs, but like it was like red and white. It was like this baseball magazine that had every player in the major leagues, had all their career stats. My mom used to give me stuff like that, give me like baseball previews when I was a kid. I used to love that. Now that I'm older, my wife and I, we do just sort of a thing at home. I mean, we'll sometimes we'll go to church. And we do a thing where I'll make fresh bread and we'll just kind of sort of do that at home. We'll just kind of pray over, the this is my body, this is the blood and all that. And we'll do that at home in kind of a ceremony with juice. I don't drink alcohol. There's nothing wrong with it. I just personally don't like the taste of alcohol. My wife drinks wine. It's not a judgment on alcohol. I don't like it. And so we'll do that and pray over that. We'll do some things together. This weekend, I'm going to just binge The Chosen. Absolutely love that series. Probably read a little bit of the Bible along with each thing just to kind of get a read for it in that regard. But yeah, so those are mine. And I forgot to answer that earlier. But we've been trying to find a church the last couple of years. We left the church we were at, and we finally found one. So it's been a couple of years since I've been at an Easter service, to be honest with you. So I'm looking forward to being at one and seeing what the new church we've been going to, what the new church we've been going to does for Easter, because we've never been there. So Tyler Eric, I'm going to answer a couple of these at the bottom, Ryan. This is from Tyler Eric. He says, "What's the bowling personal record?" Mine's 266 because I actually choked in the 10th frame. I had a perfect game going to the 9th, and I didn't really think about getting a 300 until like I struck in the 9th, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like I got a chance to go 300." And I completely choked in the 10th frame. I didn't hit the head pin either shot. First shot, 10th frame, I hit 6. I hit it short right. Had 1, 2, was it 1, 2, 4, 7, and I completely whiffed on the next one. So I went 6 open and hit it 266. I was so disappointed in myself. But yeah, never been better than that. But again, I've only bowled 1 year since I was like in 8th grade. I stopped bowling in the 8th grade. So yeah, it'd be fun to do that again. But I like to do it. I try not to be super competitive. I don't really like the golf because everyone I ever golfed with just like takes it way too seriously. But I think I'd enjoy golfing if someone just didn't take it seriously and just was out there knowing we suck and was fine with it. And because I just like doing things where I get outside, and I don't get a chance to do that a lot with this current job. So that's some fun personal questions today. I appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all asking today. That's what Mailbag's right. So we'll answer pretty much whatever. All right, let's get some more. Indy Estimate Trucking LLC. Starting with the 2017-21 O-line classes, choose your best O-line combination. 1 player from each class per position. 2 backup, 7 total spots. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And I can only pick 1 per class and 2 backups. So 17, you had, let's see, Hainsey on that team, Banks and Lugg. So let's see what that group had. Banks and Lugg. The 18 group was the down year. The only guy that I'd consider from that one is Patterson. The 19 group was Carell, Quinn Carroll, Christophic would be the only ones I'd consider from that one, right? And then 2020 was Baker and Carmody. And then 2021 was the Fisher, Alt, Spindler class, right? So all right, so let's look at this. If I could do this class, I can only pick 1 guy per class. I'd have Joe Alt as my left tackle from the 2021 class. Let's see here. Boy, this gets a little bit tough. All right, so I'd have Zeke Carell as my center from the 2019 class. I'd have Jarrett Patterson at guard. Reason why is because I think Patterson's a better guard than Zeke Carell was. He'd be my left guard. And then I would take, I'd take Hainsey or Banks from the 2017 class and make them a guard. And then I'd have to take, I could either make Hainsey at right tackle and then Carmody at guard, but I'd probably like the Banks Baker combination better. So I don't love that line because the problem is you got 4 of your in my opinion, 4 of your 5 best players are from 2 classes. So I don't necessarily love that line. And then of course my backup would be Hainsey and Blake Fisher would be my 2 backups for that line. But yeah, I wouldn't love that. I wouldn't love that line because I'd want to have, how do you not have Banks in? If I could, now here's what I'm going to cheat and say, what would be my class if I could have anyone from 2017 to 2021? That's a lot easier for me. I would have Joe Walt and Blake Fisher tackle. I'd have Robert Hainsey and Aaron Lugg or Josh Lugg at guard, and I have Jarrett Patterson at center. That's the best 4-man group. Ryan, would you agree that those classes, that's the best 5-man? So it'd be Alt and Fisher at tackle. It'd be Hainsey and Aaron Banks at guard, Patterson at center. So then I'd have Lugg as a backup. I'd have Zeke Correll as a backup, Andrew Kristofic as a backup, Tosh Baker as a backup, Michael Carmody as a backup, Rocco Spindler as a backup. So that's what I would go with. That would be mine. That would be mine. Rob Osgood says, what can Jared Parker do to make sure the offensive starts off fast in games this year instead of the past where it took a while? I'd love to see that classy bully attitude early in games. Well, I think a couple things are if your quarterback's better, you're going to start better. Let's just be honest about that. The combination of a good offensive line and a veteran quarterback should help. You should be able to run the ball a little bit better. I think establishing the run early is important. I think finding ways to get some easy completions early is good, whether it be screen game, quick game, RPOs. Take a couple shots early to try to loosen the defense up and maybe catch them on a big play. I think those things you do early in games. But then where does it start? Because, what's the preparation like? And so, I think early in the week, really challenging them with a lot of tough looks, a lot of challenging looks, and kind of early middle of the week, and then as you get closer to the game, just start getting into that perfection type of periods where you're just really going through the script on Thursday, going through the script on walkthroughs on Friday, really making sure. I'm a big believer in scripts. I mean, and others aren't, and that's fine, and it works for them. It's just about picking what works for you. I'm giving you my advice, and I'm a script guy. Something where I just feel like the players on Thursday and Friday just kind of know what you're doing. It comes from what's really worked for us during the week, what we think really can work against our opponent, and just coming out in that game and just having a really good feel for let's come out and get rolling early. They know the script. They know what we're going to try to run, and then make sure that part of it is just ability to go out and say, okay, we're going to do some things that we're going to try to build for early success. And that doesn't mean being generic or vanilla. It just means doing some things that can get you some early good runs, some early good completions, being willing to take some shots. And maybe there's some things you can do early to maybe catch another team. You say, hey, look, we really think that they're not good at adjusting to this type of motion. Or we really think if we did this schematically, we could catch a big play on them. And then take a shot early, because that's something that you can do for a big play early. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, is your offensive line blocking early, and is your quarterback getting the ball where it needs to get to early? At the end of the day, all that other stuff, it has to end with the lines getting movement and they're blocking well, and the quarterback's getting the ball where it needs to get to. That, and end result, if that's what you're doing, then you're going to be fine. And I mean, like what was interesting last year is, I mean, the first series of the game, Notre Dame hits an RPO, goes 54 yards, goes down and gets a field goal. So you're thinking, wow, this is going to be pretty good. And then after that, it was like, it was not good. So I think it's execution, man. Wasn't that the big thing last year? We kept saying after almost every game, got to execute better, got to execute better, got to execute better. They just got to execute better. It's cliche, but it's also true. It's also true. K Grant with a super chat. Go get on the message board. I agree completely with K Grant. I know he's on the message board. And I'm actually kind of happy because we made a decision recently where we got rid of PayPal, and that meant that I took a lot of people off the rolls, because all the people that use PayPal to pay, and we're back beyond where our numbers were at the time, and so we got back there a lot quicker than I thought we would. So I appreciate all of you for that use PayPal that have jumped back on using our different format. It's very, very much appreciated. Very appreciated. Cameron Ford says, good Friday today. Very emotional, but this show always makes my day. I'm glad we could do that. I'm very glad we could do that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much, Cameron. Joe asks, what do you guys think about the Hugh Freeze comments on how the NCAA should allow inter-squad scrimmages in the spring? I do not care for that at all. I understand why some coaches would want to do it. And personally, for me as a coach, I don't want to do that. I'm a big believer that the spring is very much a get back to basics period. I don't want to have to prepare for a game, because like what his comment was, it wasn't like Bama is going to play Ohio State. It was more like, I think his expression was like Bama would play Troy and maybe Auburn play UAB, or, and then my examples be like Notre Dame plays like Indiana State, or I don't know, Central Michigan, Western Michigan. It's right up the street. Ohio State plays Ohio U or something like that. It wouldn't be like, Notre Dame plays Purdue per month, really. I just don't like it. I really believe, again, spring's about your team. It's about fundamentals. It's about basics. It's ending the spring on a fun note. I don't want there to be another. I don't have to travel costs. I just want to get my team mentally right as part of that process where I think a scrimmage should be used. I'm a big believer in having a scrimmage sort of late in fall camp. Well, I don't know if I would say the week before, but maybe 10 days before your first game, 10 to 12 days before your first game. That's when I would want to have um, something is in fall camp, not in the spring. I have zero interest in that for the spring. I'd be much more prone to let's talk about getting us some scrimmages with a similar format in the fall. I think that would be much more beneficial. John A1, when eating lunch, what is your favorite side? French fries, potato chips, or something else? Man, it just depends on the lunch. I mean, what am I having? Something I've been having lately with lunches, I've been making homemade fries, like air fry, cut up potatoes and make homemade air fry. But sometimes it's a fruit, sometimes it's a piece of bread. It just depends on what I'm having as my meal. Sometimes I don't have anything as a side, but if I'm going to have a sandwich, so like let's just say for lunch I'm going to have a turkey sandwich. I'll put like turkey, provolone, lettuce on it. Last week I was making a roast beef and turkey sandwich. I love that as a combination of a sandwich. And I made some homemade fries. So I don't fry them. I mean, air fry them so they don't have as much stuff on them. And then I had some celery as a side. That was my side. So it just depends on what I'm eating. It depends on what I'm eating. T-Guns, Crocs, and Glocks. Do you prefer your wings with a bone or are you ordering chicken nuggets? If I'm getting wings, I'm having wings. They're gonna have a bone in it. If you get boneless wings, it's not wings. They call them wings, but they're not wings. They're like you said, chicken nuggets. So I'm a wing guy. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It reminds me, I need to take some of those wings out of the freezer. I do a monthly meat order through this place called Moink, and they have really good meat. I got some chicken wings last couple times ago, and I keep forgetting to take them out of the freezer in the garage and put them in to make them. So they're a bit of a pain to make. I'm not really good at finding that spot in the middle to cut them in half. I got to get better at that. But other than that, I enjoy them very much. Let's get to the next question from Chris Govia. Buy or sell? Sam Hartman breaks Brady Quinn's single season touchdown record. Well, boy, that's a good question. I'm going to sell just because I think that the fact that they're going to have the kind of running backs that they're going to have and the offensive line they're going to have, I think they're going to probably be a team that's a more run success in the red zone than maybe pass success. But I was kind of studying Sam Hartman's numbers, and last season Sam Hartman threw 38 38 touchdowns last year. So keep in mind too, like he's certainly capable of it. And if he just simply repeats what he did in either of the last 2 years, Sam Hartman breaks the record. Sam Hartman threw 38 touchdowns last year and 39 touchdowns the year before. So he's certainly capable of it. But I was sitting there thinking, like first thought I have is, well, they probably had a lot of 10 fewer than 10-yard touchdowns because they can't run the ball well. So he probably had like a little 5-yard slides and fade route, stuff like that. And then I looked at the numbers, and of his 38 touchdowns, only, let's see, 6, 7, only 8 of his 38 touchdowns were 10 yards or less. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. He threw 16 touchdowns last year that covered at least 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's a great number. That's a really good number. And so if Notre Dame can have that kind of success, then he's certainly going to be capable of breaking that record. I just assumed that a lot of his touchdowns were going to be short touchdowns. For example, last year, Notre Dame only threw 22 touchdowns. 8 of them were less than 10 yards, and 12 of them were beyond. They had 10 touchdowns that were traveled 20 yards or more. Uh, that I was impressed by that number and how few of them were less than 10. So if he repeats that, then that's going to be an impressive number. I just feel like with the way Notre Dame runs the ball, if I had to bet, I'd sell, but I don't do it with a great deal of confidence at this point in time. John A1 says, what are your 5 college non-conference matchups you'd like to see? Teams you'd want to play each other, scheduled or not, over the next 2 years? That's a good question. I especially like the fact that you said it's the scheduled part. I don't know what it is, but I would really enjoy an Alabama USC matchup. I don't know what it is, but I've just always liked when those two teams play, and it doesn't happen often. Maybe it's the different colors of maroon. It's the completely different like universes. You've got Alabama and Los Angeles, West Coast versus Southeast. I think that'd be a great matchup. Notre Dame, Texas is one that I would like as we kind of think about this. Some other non-conference matchups. So you get the Big 12 taken care of there. You get the SEC and the Pac-12. You know what's a game that I really enjoyed a couple of years ago that I'd love to see again out there is Ohio State, Oregon. You got the two big O programs. They have they're the flashy teams. I think the West Coast, Midwest. I think the Ohio State, Oregon would be a good one. I'm sure Ohio State fans would love to get a little rematch game against Oregon after what happened to them when they played Oregon in 2021. That'd be another one. And then let's see, number 5. What would be another game, a fifth non-conference game that I would really like to see? I am going to go with Florida playing anyone on the planet above the Mason-Dixon line. That's what I would like to see. I'd like to see Florida actually go above the Mason-Dixon line to play a game. That would be great. So let's just say Florida and Ohio State in the Urban Meyer Bowl. How about that? And then we'll take away Ohio State from Oregon, and we'll have Penn State play Oregon. Here's why Penn State, Oregon. The most boring uniforms in college football against the most insane uniforms in college football. That's why I'm going with that one. How about that? Those are ones that just kind of off the top of my head I would have some fun with. So there's that one. Let's move on to the next one. T-Guns, Crocs, and Glocks. If you could pick one for the backyard, are you picking a pool without a heater or a hot tub? Is your answer the same with adding a heater to the pool? Honestly, neither. I am not a pool, hot tub outside guy because it sounds cool, but you know how much maintenance and how much that costs? I'm way too cheap to have a pool or a hot tub outside. Way too cheap. I would rather just have a really nice bathtub that if my wife wants to have a hot tub or bubbles, she can turn it on. I would have neither. I grew up as a community pool guy, right? Like we used to go to the pool in Delphus. There's this giant pool in Delphus, Ohio that we would go to as kids. I'm more of a community pool guy. I was never, and maybe that's because I didn't grow up with money and it was just never a thing. But the only pools that people had in my family were like the above ground pools. Those are the worst. So I've never been much of a pool guy, to be honest with you. I'm just, and that stuff's expensive. Are you? Well, are you paying the bills, Tommy, for like the maintenance? If you're paying the bills, I would like to get a pool because I'd like to have it'd be a good workout. You could get my wife loves to swim. So like if I was ever going to have something like that, and let's just say I actually was wealthy enough to do that, which I'm not, I would love to have like a house, like kind of out in the country with like a big yard and like a really long, maybe not as wide, but a longer pool that you can kind of swim laps. It'd be a great workout. My wife would certainly love that, but I'm not much of a hot tub guy, to be honest with you. I get in those for a couple minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm too hot. I gotta get out of here. This is ridiculous. So, and I'd have to pay for it, and it's too expensive and too much maintenance. So hard pass on either one of those, to be honest with you. Unless you're paying for it, Tommy, then I'm good. I'll take both of them. You're paying for the pools and the maintenance. That's cool. I'll take both of them. Rob Osgood with a question. World War II question. If you had to be a tanker in World War II, what tank would you want to be in, regardless of what side? Well, I'd want to be in a Sherman because I would want to be a tanker under General Patton. The two best. I mean, and they're both well known. Some people could argue that there's others that should be in the conversation, but you had Rommel with the Germans with the Panzers, and you had Patton with the Shermans, primarily the Shermans. And so those to me were the two best tank commanders in that war for the most part. There's a couple others like Montgomery. I think who was the guy from Britain? Was it Montgomery? I can't remember who that was that did all that work in North Africa with their tanks fighting against the Panzers. But I'm an American, man, and I'd want to fight under General Patton if I was alive back then. So if I'm going to fight under General Patton, then I'm going to be in a Sherman. So that would be So to me, it's not so much. I mean, obviously the quality of the tank matters. You need that, but to me, it's also what also is important is being under a general who's going to lead you to success, and that's General Patton, in my opinion. So that would be my answer. Be my answer. Event ND, are the dancing gifts from January, February still dancing? Seems like the longest public commitments have dragged out. You are not kidding on that one. One of them, two of them we still expect to happen, just don't know when. And one of them we don't expect to happen anymore because of a coaching change. So we'll describe them when those things happen. We'll announce kind of what they were when they happened. But yeah, three of those are still out there. John A1 says, growing up, a wide receiver became legendary if they weren't scared to run through the middle of the field. Michael Irvin and Terrell Owens made huge catches consistently while facing a big hit. Part two says, is there an element to that? Is there an element to that in today's game or anything like it in the modern game? No, I don't think so. Because now it's like if you really crush a receiver, it's a 15-yard penalty. Like Sean Taylor could not play in today's era the way he played with the Redskins in Miami. I don't like it, but he can't. Steve Atwater would probably be a linebacker in today's game. You can't hit receivers like that. I don't like it, but it's created receivers that have a lot more courage over the middle. And look, the rule changes are all about TV. It's not so much that the game is better. Some people think it is. Some people don't. It's just the case with everything. I personally don't. But it's all about the TV ratings and offense sells to the casual fan. The diehards, it's like baseball. We're talking about the other day of baseball. A diehard, a long-term baseball fan, somebody that grew up in the game who's an older fan is going to love a 1-0 pitcher's duel with great defense. Enjoy that. Today's fans, they want runs. And so many of these leagues are catering the casual fan because they know the diehards more often than not aren't going to leave. So no matter what you do, the diehards are going to stick with you. But it's what can they do to promote more casual fans to watch, and that's scoring. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to it because, like I've said this before, it's probably zone like soccer. You can win 1-0 and it'd be a dominant win, and it just bores me to death. And if I didn't grow up playing baseball and loving baseball as a kid, I'd probably feel the same way about baseball. It's just I played the game and loved the game and loved the game and the way it was when I was growing up, and I just don't enjoy it anymore. All right, let's get to some more here. Nathan Milton, Brian, what is your least favorite nickname? I'm telling you that because then you're going to call me that. So I'll tell you my favorite one is I grew up, everybody called me BD, Brian Driscoll, BD. John Garcia calls me that, which I was like, dude, you know that was my nickname growing up, right? So John calls me that, but that was my favorite nickname growing up was BD. All my coaches called me that growing up. Real imaginative, right? Archer 452. Could you imagine Jack Tatum today? I mean, Jack Tatum, Ronnie Lott, those guys couldn't play in today's era. You know, somebody just said Chuck Bednarik would be in prison. You're absolutely. Dick Butkus would literally have felony assault charges against him with some of the stuff he did, like the clotheslines and stuff he did. There's some of that stuff I'm good with. Like some of the stuff was like, dude, that's not football. That's dirty. But like, it's just getting to the point now where it's like it's just like I'm watching the NFL playoffs and like a guy lands on a quarterback and that's a penalty. This is the dumbest thing ever. And it's just like, what was the one? There's a D tackle that kind of like rolled up on Tom Brady and it was just like, oh my God, 15-yard penalty. And I'm like, this is stupid. This is such a soft league. And that's not about player safety. That's about protecting quarterbacks because they're your money people. I think that's silly. I can't stand it. I just don't enjoy. That's why I don't enjoy the NFL. And here's the problem. So many NFL people and so many money people that have ruined this sport. And for me, some people love the NFL. That's fine. For me, are trying to do the same thing in college football. And I can't stand it. I just really can't stand it. All right, let's get to some more. Wade Garrett, what is your sporting event bucket list? Either a place or event game. Well, I would like to attend a Super Bowl someday. I will never happen. I'll never have enough money to attend a Super Bowl. But that'd be fun, to be at a Super Bowl, maybe cover it or something, which again won't happen because I'll cover the NFL. That'd be pretty cool. I've always wanted to attend a World Series game, preferably the Reds, but I think that'd be a pretty cool event. Trying to think of some others. I mean, there's like a lot of it's going to be college football games. Like I'd love to attend Ohio State, Michigan. I'd love to attend the Florida Georgia game. I'd love to attend the Iron Bowl. I would love to attend Like games like that. I'd love to go to the Red River Shootout. I'd love to go to that. That'd be so much fun. But other than that, like, there's not a ton. Like, I'm not a somebody said the Masters. I'm not a golf guy. I think watching golf is like the most boring thing in the world. For me, again, this is for me. I don't enjoy that. I also I don't love basketball games in person, to be completely honest with you. I prefer watching basketball games on TV. But football I like watching in person, especially if you can get the right seat. But I mean, those would be like a lot of those football rivalries would be fun. Those yearly annual Washington State, Oregon State. I'd love to attend a Rose Bowl game at USC and UCLA, or any Rose Bowl that Notre Dame would, a real Rose Bowl that Notre Dame would play in. The problem with that is I'd have to go out to California to do that, and I'd just rather not go out to California. But for the Rose Bowl, I would, like the real Rose Bowl, not the one that they played in like Atlanta a couple years ago, like a real Rose Bowl in Pasadena. That'd be that's about the only thing that could probably that or a national championship game, about the only things that get me in the state of California. So, but I would suck it up for that. There's no doubt. But I mean, those are things that I'd like to see. You know what's one? Here's one. I've always wanted to watch a game at Cameron. The only basketball place that I've ever want. I wanted to watch a game at Boston Garden, which I can't anymore because it doesn't exist anymore. And I would love to watch a game at a Duke, North Carolina game at Cameron Indoor. I think that'd be really cool. That's the only other basketball game I'd want to watch. To be honest with you, there's some sporting event bucket lists that I've actually been able to do. I've been able to watch a game at Wrigley. I was able to watch a game at the old Wrigley Field. Um, excuse me, Yankee Stadium. I'd love to watch a baseball game at Fenway. I've seen a football game there. I would love to see a baseball game at Fenway. That'd be pretty cool. That's a bucket list item for me. I'd say before I started just liking the game of baseball, one of the dreams I always had was renting an RV with Angela and just like literally spending a summer when I was retired, just driving from every baseball park in America. And just that's my summer vacation. That would be so much fun. That would be a lot of fun. Like other things like NASCAR just doesn't do it for me. But there's things people have told me though that if you actually went, you'd enjoy it. But to me, it's just like watching dudes drive in circles. It just doesn't seem like a lot of fun. But people have said it's really good. WrestleMania would have been cool as a kid, but I don't really view that as as a sporting event. It's more of entertainment. Is more of that. But I mean, as a kid, that'd have been cool. But I just don't have the same investment now. Like, because to me, like WrestleMania is like, are you invested in the characters, right? Like, so as a kid, I would have, oh my Hulk Hogan, yay, I'm a real American. As a teenager, early 20s, I would have gone to WrestleMania to watch like Stone Cold and The Rock. Absolutely, that because I was invested in the characters. It was entertaining for me. Now I don't know hardly any wrestlers, so it wouldn't be that much fun for me. And I'll be honest with you, sporting events nowadays is just not as much fun as it used to be. I feel like it's like every time I go to a game, there's some fight breaking out in the stands. I have no interest in that. I'm a freaking adult. I have no interest in that. So, but yeah, I think I don't see that as much as in college football. I don't. My sister used to get season tickets to Redskins games, and she's like, there'd be like multiple fights breaking out in the stands of every single game. It was just nuts. And I don't. Hard pass for me. Let's get to some more here. John A1, and if the 2021 team has the 2022 offensive line, would that team have been able to compete in the playoff? Ooh, good question. Yeah, I think it could have been able to compete. It would have depended on who they got in the first round, but I don't think any of the teams in the 2021 playoff were that good. I've said this before. Just yeah, I'm not a. I think so. Yeah, because I mean, they'd have had skill talent. They'd had Kevin Austin was playing well late in the year. You had Michael Mayer, Lorenzo Styles was playing well. You'd have had Kyron at running back, Jack Cohn at quarterback, pretty good defense. Kyle Hamilton probably would have come back for a playoff game. That might have helped. But compete, yes. Would they have won it all? Probably not. But I think they could have competed. They'd have been competitive. But I still don't think they could have beat Georgia. Even with the 2022 offensive line, I still don't think they could have beat Georgia. That Georgia front seven was because football's about matchups, right? And I don't think Notre Dame would have matched up well against Georgia in 2021. I think they could have matched up better against Bama than Georgia. I still think Georgia would have beat them in 2021. That to me, it wasn't a great team, but it was probably the most complete team in college football last year. And I don't think Notre Dame would have beat them. It could have if like caught a couple breaks, but I wouldn't have. I would bet on. Somebody said fights are the best part of the game, Brian. To each their own. Pass. Pass on that one. All right, let's get to the next one from Hunter H. It says, is the perception around college football changing about Notre Dame quarterbacks? Haven't had this talent in a while. I don't think it's changing yet. I think it will change after the season. I don't think Benjamin Morrison being a freshman All-American has necessarily changed the perception, because I still don't think there's a lot of great vibes about Cam Hart, and like the All-American list came out, like the Walter Camp All-American list. Let me find that one here real quick. But it came out, and they had Benjamin Morrison on the second team All-American list, but he wasn't on the first team. And so, even then, it's just kind of like they still being a little bit disrespected, in my opinion. And you look at the 4 DBs, like they had Kalen Bullock on there from USC, Cameron Kinchins from Miami, Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, he's pretty good, and then Kalen King from Penn State, who's pretty good. Then Benjamin on the second team. So I don't think having a preseason second team All-American necessarily moves the needle. I think that'll change, Hunter, after 2023, if the corners are as good as we think they are. If that happens, then yes, it'll start to change. But I don't think it's changed yet, because I don't think the corners played great all of last year. They played great at times, and they played good most of the year, not all of it. But it's going to require them to play really well this year. I mean, hey, look, you go down there and keep Marvin Harrison from taking that game over, and you handle your business against USC. Okay, that starts to change the need. That starts to move the, and that's the other thing too, is in the biggest match of the year, 2 of your 3 best cornerbacks didn't even play against USC. That was a missed opportunity as well. So it's changing in Notre Dame's universe. It's changing on the field. I don't think the national perception has changed yet. I think they're going to have to play really well this year, and I also think they need to have some draft success, to be completely honest with you, before you could get to that point in time. So. All right, we got one from Brandon Plesner. Has the new NCAA president taken over yet? And do you have confidence at all that the whole NIL pay-for-player transfer portal issue is being fixed in the next 2 years? I believe he has, but I don't think it's going to get fixed properly. Like, one of the things that you're hearing, the concerns that are coming out of the hearings that happened this past week in Congress, is that there's going to be some sort of, they're going to expand sort of their antitrust aspects of it to protect them from them having employees, which I'm a fan of. But then they're talking about maybe putting caps on NIL, which I think is absurd. There's no reason to have caps on NIL. None. If a company is willing to pay a quarterback X amount of dollars to market their product, there should be no cap on that. There's no cap on anybody else getting products. If you want to cap things, and what you need to do is you say you can put caps on the collectives. Here's what I would do with collectives. I'd put caps on collectives, and I'd say collectives can't go past X amount of dollars. And then those dollars have to be dispersed evenly to your entire roster, up to 100 players. Say that. And you give X amount to scholarship players and then X amount to walk-ons. And if you don't have 85 scholarship players, that's fine, but you can't then pay extra money to your players. So I'd say put a cap on how much money can be in the collective, and then put a cap on how much money the collective gives to individual players, because you kind of spread it out. There's no one player's getting more than another through the collectives. Then you open up NIL to the free market. That's how I think it should be. So again, if Michael Mayer is going to get a bunch of money because he is a marketable player, God bless America. Have at it. As long as it's a real exchange of services. And this is the whole thing with me. This is why I hate the collectives the way that they are now. Is it's not name, image, and likeness. It's we're going to pay you to recruit you and buy you to come here. That's not what NIL should be, in my opinion. NIL should, in my opinion, should be you're getting money off jerseys. You can autograph stuff and sell it. You can sell pictures of yourself that you autograph and sell to people. You can be part of a commercial thing. You can be a featured speaker at some event. You can start your own YouTube channel. You can start your own clothing line. You can do all these things to make money off your name, image, and likeness. And if people are willing to buy it, God bless America. If a company is willing to pay one guy $10 million to be a spokesman and another guy $1 million, God bless America. Because there's going to be some sports where the players are more marketable. I've always felt basketball players tend to be more marketable from a brand standpoint because you see their face all the time. There's fewer of them on per team. And you see some of the sports that are like smaller number of rosters or smaller number of players. One guy can be a star. Those guys are always to be more marketable. That's why there's so many more guys that have great Nike shoes that are basketball players than we've had football players. But I'm a supporter of that. What I hate is just these collectives just giving these kids money for just to convince them to come to school there. I don't think that's what it's meant to be. I don't think that helps the game. I think collectives can be very helpful if they're done correctly, but collective should not be a situation where a collective is being used to give $500,000 to a kid that's coming there. I think the other thing that I would change if it was up to me and I was able to get it passed and be able to be protected from lawsuits is if you sign a kid to a deal, it doesn't matter where he goes, you have to honor that deal as an undergraduate. You cannot, I would say you cannot have any conversations whatsoever. A company cannot, nobody can have conversations with a player before he's going to college, unless it is like a company that is not attached to a school. So if, for example, a kid, I want to pay CJ Carr $1 million to be the spokesman of my company. I'm some Michigan company and I want CJ. It's not tied into any specific school. Yeah, I'm taking a gamble because my fans are Michigan fans. If he goes to Notre Dame, that's my problem. But I can't have any conversation about, hey, CJ, go to Michigan, here's $1 million, or go to Michigan State, or go to Notre Dame, here's $1 million. It's, hey, we think you could be a great spokesman for our company. We want to offer you $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, whatever the case may be, and say, I don't care where you go to school. We're on board with you. And I think that I would be fine with that. But this whole notion of I'm going to give some kid who's never proven a thing X amount of dollars to just come play for my school and there's no really exchange of services, I don't like that. And I don't think that should be what NIL is about. It should. So collectives disperse money to the entire roster evenly. I'm all for that. And then NIL in regard to if players are more popular, more famous, then they make more money. I'm fine with that. I'm a fan of equality. I'm not a fan of equity. I don't believe in equity. I believe in equality, equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. I think when you start getting to equity, you start taking away the desire to work to be the best because it's just going to be, I'm going to get this anyway. So why should I strive for greatness? I think equality, equal opportunity, I'm all for that. I'm not an equity person. So, and that's what I don't like about caps for this type of situation. I'm all for salary caps when you're talking about a team salary because there's the difference in markets and things like that. I somewhat understand that. But when it comes to individuals being able to benefit off their name, image, and likeness in the public forum, there shouldn't be caps on that, in my opinion. There shouldn't. Jared Rhodes says, Brian, last year we all thought the Irish were going to be really good. We all felt let down a little. How do your feelings of the offseason compare to last year? Thanks for all the content. Well, I think the thing this year, Jared, is there's more knowns. One of the things we said last year is, but we don't really know, right? And so it was sort of we like this talent, we think this, we think that, we hope this, and we've said before the margin for error was not necessarily great in certain spots, especially like quarterback and things like that. Receiver was a question mark with all the injuries. And I just feel like this year the roster is a lot deeper. I do. I mean, there's not a lot of NFL draft excitement for Notre Dame players. And why? Because there's just not a lot of Notre Dame players in the draft. And so, because almost your entire receiving core is coming back, your entire running back room's coming back. You've added to your quarterback room, not subtracted from it. You lost one kid, added two that are both better than he is. Your defense brings a ton of guys back. You lose Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamiola. You bring in Javonte Jean-Baptiste. All your linebackers are coming back. Almost your entire secondary is coming back. And so I just think that there's way more knowns, Jared, this year than last year from a player standpoint. Now, there's as many question marks coaching-wise as last year because of new coaches and will this coach make a change and all that. But from a player standpoint, I just think the roster's healthier than it was a year ago. And yeah, I mean, last year I felt let down a little bit by last year because of the Stanford and Marshall games. There's no question. And I think this team has to learn how to not lose those kind of games. And if they do, this team's going to be really good. But I just think the talent's so much better. And all the guys that we were hoping to break out as sophomores last year, they're all juniors now. They're going to be older, stronger, more comfortable in the system. And that's where a lot of my excitement comes from. But as Ryan and I have talked about also, this is still a show me season for Notre Dame. There's still a lot to prove for this football team, in my opinion. John A1 asks if Josh Burnham splits reps with Jordan Patelho and puts and is put in positions to succeed, what would your 2023 expectations to be for him? My hope for Josh this year is that his numbers look a lot like Isaiah Foskey's as a redshirt freshman, because he's not going to just split reps with Jordan Patelho. He's also going to be splitting reps with Jordan Junior Tuihalamaka. And my hope is that he gets some base down reps, and he gets some third down reps, and has 4 to 4.5 sacks this year as a rotation guy, which is a lot like where Foskey was. So that's kind of my hopes for Josh. I just don't know if they're going to give him that opportunity or not. We'll see. We shall see. Archer452 said NBA All-Star Laurie McCannon will serve his mandatory Finnish military service this offseason. Sun Heung Min's from soccer do the same for South Korea. Does this make you have more respect for them? I do. Yes. Is there a two-part of this? Athletes fulfilling those requirements instead of taking exemptions are the types of leaders I want on my favorite teams. I agree with you, Archer. I do. I'm not necessarily. I've had people say, "Well, why doesn't America do that?" So we don't need to. Part of the reason that those countries do that is because their populations are so small. It's like Israel has requirements for that. The populations are so small that the population as a whole needs to be trained in order to fight, if it ever comes to that. If there's ever a need for war, then you need those people to be trained to fight. And by making them serve a certain amount of time in the military, then you can activate a larger number of people if you ever have the need to go to war. When I was a kid, we had an exchange student from West Germany. For those of that you are younger, Germany used to be split in two. East Germany was the communist part, and West Germany was the free part, right? And the wall came down, I think it was like 90, 91, and they unified again. But we had one from West Germany, which is the free part, and they had the same thing there. Like you had to, when you were I think it was 18, you had to serve in the military for a year. And so that's why they do it. And the guys that get exemptions for that, that's fine. I don't disrespect them. I understand it. But the guys that choose to do that, that's very honorable, in my opinion. Just for me, it's very honorable, and I have a great deal of respect for that. Especially now, when you think about with the first guy that you mentioned, was he from Finland? Ryan, can you bring up that first part of that question again, please? Is it gone? Okay, you undid it. So I don't know where he's from. I think it was like Finland or something like that. If you're in Europe right now, it's a bit of a powder keg. And so someone that's choosing to do that right now, that takes a lot of courage, a lot of courage. So yes, I have a great deal of respect for that. Joseph DeJagger says, why not move Ryan Barnes and or Chance Tucker to safety if the staff doesn't want to move Clarence Lewis? Well, I don't think either of those guys move the needle. The whole point about moving Clarence Lewis is he's proven. I don't think moving a guy who's unproven to safety necessarily moves the needle. I think we've seen, and I don't think Chance Tucker has the body to do that. I don't think he has the body to make that move. So that doesn't work. Ryan Barnes probably could make that move, and we've seen him play a little nickel so far this spring, and I could see a scenario where maybe he's playing some nickel and also some safety. I could see that, but the problem is you're not really you're adding another unknown to it. Where at least with Clarence Lewis, there's going to be a position switch adjustment, but it's still a bit of an unknown. I mean, it's a bit of a known. That's kind of what we know he can cover. We know he can do this. He can do these other type of things. It's just one of those aspects where there's going to be a safety adjustment, but there's a lot of things he already knows. With Ryan Barnes, it's a complete adjustment. And as we've seen with Xavier Watts and we saw with Rowan Henderson, if it's an inexperienced player, it can take a year to really get comfortable at that position. And so I'm okay if they want to move Ryan Barnes, but I don't know how much Ryan Barnes answers the need right now. And I just don't understand their reluctance to move Clarence Lewis. It really just doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Tyler Smith asked, question I had yesterday, what is your top 5 memorable year in sports? I would have to say 2006 when Ohio State lost to Florida in football and basketball championship that year as my one. That's a good question. So to me, trying to think back, there were some times back in the, I mean, for me, it's going to be back in the 80s. I mean, it would probably be 1986 probably would be a year for me that I would look back on and say my life probably the best year. That year is the Reds, excuse me, the Celtics won a title. They won the 85-86 title. It was Bird's last title, his third, and I think the third year in a row in which he won a World Series. I mean, won an MVP. The Reds were not great that year, but they were good. Went to a lot of games that year, if I remember correctly. And then the Broncos that year were really good too. And I think that year I think they went to the Super Bowl that year. Yeah, they played the Giants that year. So it didn't end with a win, but at the time, I was a big Broncos fan, but the Celtics were my number one team. I loved watching NBA games. My dad. I told y'all how I used to bowl as a kid. My parents bought this van when we were kids, a Paul Sherry van. I'll never forget this. And this is back when they first started putting TVs in vans, and there was like TV like this big. It was black and white, and you had to dial. It's like 12 channels. And so we would bowl, and my dad and I, while my sister was bowling, would run out to the car. And this was on Saturday. So they had the Celtics games at like in the afternoon, and then the Lakers games would come afterwards. We'd go out to the car and we'd turn the Celtics game on and watch it in the van. And so loved watching Celtics games as a kid. And the Reds, like I said, the Reds were good. There wasn't as many baseball games on back then. And then, of course, the Broncos were good that year, and I got to watch John Elway. So probably like 1986 would probably be one of my more memorable years in sports. I'd have to think through some others, but yeah, 1988 was a big one for me. Also, for a bunch of different reasons, obviously. But 1988, you had Notre Dame won a title, which was big for me. That year, the Broncos weren't that good, to be honest with you. So that kind of dampened a little bit. The Celtics weren't that good, so that dampened a little bit. But I was also, as a kid, I grew up a Michigan basketball fan. And that was the year I kind of became a Michigan basketball fan, watching that Final Four and watching that NCAA tournament. That was a great tournament. And so that would be another one for me that I thought was pretty good. Pretty good. 93 would have been another one for me. Again, Broncos weren't as good. Reds weren't as good, but obviously you had the Final Four for the Fab Five. Notre Dame had that very memorable season. The Reds sucked then. The Broncos weren't that good then, but college sports was, and that was kind of as I was starting to transition to being more of a college sports fan, to be completely honest with you. That was definitely during that stretch when I was becoming much more of a fan of college sports than I was NFL sports. So I'm not much of a Michigan basketball fan anymore. I don't really follow basketball anymore. But when I was a kid, I was definitely a Michigan basketball fan and a Notre Dame football fan. So I just never was someone that felt the need to like love Notre Dame and everything as a kid. More so now, but when I was a kid, it wasn't that way. And Notre Dame basketball wasn't very good when I was a kid that I remember. John A. 1 says, is it possible for Micah Bell to provide the desired depth at the nickel spot upon his arrival this summer? I don't know if that would be work. I think Micah, he's small. And I don't know if that would be possible. But I'll tell you this, John. Is it possible? That's possible. I don't know if it's likely, but I'd give him every chance. I would give him every chance in the world to prove it, because you just can't teach that speed. And I think, I think Ryan might attest to this, but if you're in a situation where, and I've told you all that about Michigan basketball, so don't act like you haven't heard that before. But when you look at it from the standpoint of being a nickel, Mike has got a lot to learn about the position. And I think one of the things that could help him is playing the nickel could help protect him over the top with some of the size things early on as he learns the game better. You can protect him a little bit better in the slot than you could outside. And, but is he going to be as good of a tackler as Tariq Bracy was last year? That's one part of Tariq Bracy that I think it gets underrated. And Ryan talked about this in his recent draft breakdown of Tariq Bracy. He's a very solid tackler in space this year. Had multiple tackles for loss. He was a good player for Notre Dame this year in a lot of different ways. And can Christian bring that? Because as a nickel, you've got to be able to tackle. I'm not Christian, but Mike can bring that. You got to be able to tackle. That'd be my question mark, but I'd try to find a way. For him to be good, for him to play, just because he's so fast. If he doesn't make it, that's fine. You get ready for him for next year. But yeah, that would be my best guess. Irish Blood says, how close was Notre Dame and Bob Stoops to being the head coach over Brian Kelly? Was also always rumored as basically done, but fell through. Are there any others like that that aren't as well known? So, what I was told back then, and what I've been told multiple times since, was is that Notre Dame reached out to Kirk Ferentz and Bob Stoops before they hired Brian Kelly because they knew Brian Kelly was going to take the job. But that's was Jack Swarbrick's kind of dream coaches was Ferentz and Stoops. I was told at the time that Stoops verbally agreed to take the job and very quickly, I think maybe like within 24 hours, backed out because he didn't feel he was done at Oklahoma just yet. I think it'd been cool of you to taking it at the time, but that's what I was told. And so it was not a formal agreement. It was a verbal agreement and never got to the point where he signed the contract and backed out. But that would be one. That would be one. Archer 452. If Ohio State goes back to back in the first two college football playoffs, would Ohio State have taken the crown from Bama and established themselves as the top program in the CFP era? Probably. I mean, look, part of the Bama success was that they won. And by the time the playoff would have started, Bama already had 3 titles. So it's not like Bama would have not been anything. Could Ohio State have done that? Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Because now all of a sudden they're 3 to your 2, and then maybe you start beating them for more recruits. But Ohio State missed a great opportunity. I still say this. There was no team with more talent top to bottom than Ohio State in 2015. Nobody. That was an incredible missed opportunity by Ohio State because that team it was more guys looking out for themselves and not a very good team. And it was not great coaching on that team as well. But I mean, it could have helped a lot. I think what would have probably happened, Archer, is not that Bama, they would have taken the crown from Bama. I think what would have probably happened is they would have become Clemson. They would have knocked Clemson out, and Clemson wouldn't have been that team. Is probably more likely. That's probably more likely than they knock Bama out. Because like I said, Bama still had 3 titles. And there's a couple Bama teams that came along the next way that were pretty good. And I don't know if Ohio State would have changed that. I think what they would have done is they would have changed Clemson's trajectory at that point. Mike Reddy asks, how will the D-line board differ if Brandon Davis Swain was still committed? Would the Smith twins still be a priority, or would they push harder for other guys, Williams, Thomas, Mayo, Lindsey? That's a really good question, Mike. So let's say Brandon Davis Swain was committed and not taking visits. So he was locked in. He's not going anywhere. He's not taking visits anywhere else. He's just committed to Notre Dame. I think it would have impacted the Smith twins for sure because I don't think Jared's an inside guy. I don't think he's big enough to play 3 technique. He's not like Jason Adamiola in that regard. I think he has to be most likely a big end. I'm just not sure if I'd want him inside. So you'd have your big end in the class. I think, how does that impact Bryce Young? Bryce, do you see him in there, or do you see Brandon Davis Swain becoming a 3 technique? And then how does that impact, that part of it? So I think they'd still go after Justin Scott, but I wonder if the Smith twins would be still there. I think what you'd maybe still do is bring in Bryce Young because he could be a big between those 2 guys. One of them maybe could be a 3 technique also, and they could both be big ends. And then focus your time on finding a Viper. I think that's probably what they would do, Mike, is because I think they would focus on Justin, Bryce Young, and then finding a Viper. I think is what the focus would be on. That's a good question. Very good question. Irish Blood says, who is a Power 5 level team Notre Dame has never played? Would you love to see a home and home again? So there's some teams like that. So I'm going to go to the Notre Dame Wikipedia page. I don't think they've played it. They've never played Mississippi State. I don't care to ever watch them play in Mississippi State. It just doesn't mean anything to me. There's a couple SEC teams they've never played. They've played Ole Miss, played them twice. They've played, they've never played against Arkansas. We will see that happen. They will play against Arkansas. I think that'd be cool to see them play Arkansas, 2 teams that have some level of tradition. They have never played Kentucky in football. Don't care about that one. Let's see here. So let's see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 SEC teams that we've talked about. They've never played Mississippi State. They've never played Arkansas. They've never played Kentucky, and they've never played against Auburn. Uh, I don't know. I wouldn't mind them playing Auburn in a bowl game. I don't care about a home and home against Auburn. That's not one I really care much about. So the Arkansas one I think is cool because I think Notre Dame would like to recruit that region. I think that's a cool one. Notre Dame has never played Texas Tech. Don't care to play Texas Tech. That's a Pac-12. That's a Big 12 team that Notre Dame has never played. I'm trying to see who is the other Big 12 that Notre Dame has never played. Got West Virginia, TCU, Iowa State, Baylor, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma State. They've never played Kansas State. I'd be fine if they got a home and home with Kansas State. Be fine. I don't really. It's not going to like move the needle for me if they do play them. But I mean, I'd be fine. Be fine with that. So those are a couple Power Fives that they've played, and none of them are necessarily move the needle ones for me. I think Auburn maybe, but I'd rather that be a bowl game. I'm not really someone who cares much about playing the true SEC teams, like the Southeastern SEC teams. I care more about, you want to play in Arkansas, you want to play in Missouri. They have played Missouri in the past, yes. Not a bunch. They've played them 4 times in the past. They're 2-2 against Missouri. The last time they played was 1984. Is the last time they played. Notre Dame won that 16-4. Notre Dame also beat Missouri in 1970, and then Missouri won in 72 and 78 are the 2 times that Missouri beat them. So they have played Missouri 4 times. They've played Georgia 3 times, Ole Miss twice, Tennessee 8 times, LSU 12 times, A&M 5 times, most in bowl games. Alabama 8 times, South Carolina 5 times, Florida once, Vanderbilt 3 times. So that's Notre Dame's track record in CSEC. And on top of the teams that I just mentioned, they have not played in the past. J.P. Buellsfeld, my friend, what recruit did you most underestimate, and what recruit was most disappointing to you? I go first. Drew Tranquill and Dane Christ. I liked Drew Tranquill coming out, so I wouldn't say one for me. Underestimate. I didn't think Kyron Williams was going to be that good. I mean, I thought he'd be a nice rotation back. I thought he was a really good football player. I just didn't see the projection for him. Thought he'd be like a nice dual threat guy, could be a number 2 back. I never saw Kyron Williams as a lead running back, and he was definitely that. So I definitely underestimated Kyron Williams. I'll still say the biggest disappointment for me is Josh Barajas. I love that kid coming out, and the reasons he didn't make it were disappointing. Just didn't work, had some other issues. But, man, I thought he was going to be good. I really thought he was going to be good. Dane Christ was disappointing, but I don't blame that all on Dane. I thought he got ruined by Charlie Molnar. But, Dane was always going to be inaccurate. But Dane had a big arm. I mean, if he doesn't get hurt against Michigan in 2010, they beat Michigan. I mean, they thoroughly outplayed Michigan. Michigan came back after Dane went out, and they put Nate Montana and then Tom Reese in the game. That's when Michigan came back and got into that game. But Notre Dame was I'm trying to remember what they outscored them pretty significantly when Dane Christ was in the game. But they were playing really well. He'd thrown that he had an option run. He got hurt. That let him down on a drive. But I feel like Notre Dame wins that game if Dane Christ doesn't get hurt. I really do. I really do. All right, let's go back to some more here. We've got Gideon Rosa says, what happened to Graham Mertz and Bo Nix? Extremely talented coming to high school, but both not developing like they should. I disagree with you on Bo Nix. I have had a different view on Bo Nix than a lot of people. I think Bo Nix's biggest problem at Auburn was, A, the expectations were too high, and B, he played in a garbage offense that didn't fit his skill set. He went to Auburn because his dad went to Auburn. He didn't go to Auburn, in my opinion, because he fit that offense, because he didn't. And I think that was a mistake. Graham Mertz just never showed the feel for the game. I mean, and that happens sometimes. I mean, we see it even now. You see the arm talent, or excuse me, the arm strength, I should say. But he's just a kid that I never saw much as a he just hasn't developed mentally the way that you'd want him to. He just doesn't read defenses the way you want him to. He doesn't have the accuracy you want him to. So that one, he hasn't developed. But I mean, Bo Nix was a really good football player last year. And I feel like people have just kind of put Bo into this, well, he is what he is because of his first 2 years box. And they're not willing to kind of evaluate him for what he's doing now. They're still kind of looking at him as like the guy at Auburn. And he was an inconsistent player at Auburn. I won't dispute that. But Bo Nix last year threw for 3,593 yards, rushed for 510 yards, and accounted for 43 touchdowns and had 7 picks. How's that not developing like he should? That's exactly what Bo should have been. I think the problem with him is at Auburn he was wasted because Auburn was just a hot mess, an absolute hot mess under Gus Malzahn. And so I don't blame Bo Nix for that. I don't. He got into a real offense and he thrived, in my opinion. And and he's handled a lot of adversity. So I have a lot of respect for Bo. Is he a star? No. Should he have been a 5-star? No, he shouldn't have. I never thought he was, but I think he catches way too much heat. Way too much heat, in my opinion. Gideon Rosa says, have you been back to Polito since the renovation? I have not. I need to. I've been talking about, and I got to talk to them about it, but I was thinking about like maybe trying to do something like a Friday night thing, get together. I don't even know if they still have people there since the fire, but doing like maybe a get together Friday night before the Blue Gold game, and just getting pizza, everybody getting pizza. I'll pay for it, but I'm not sure if they can do that. I got to reach out to them and see if that's something that they'll do. So, but no, I have not. It's because like where we live, it's kind of far away. I just don't get out there as much as I'd like to. It's great pizza though, it really is, and they don't deliver out here, so that's the other problem. Adam Blair says a duo of Joe Alt and Ronnie Stanley or Quentin Nelson and Zach Martin. I'm going Quentin Nelson and Zach Martin. I mean, Quentin Nelson is such a dominant player, and Zach Martin was, to me, a better college player than Ronnie Stanley, in my opinion. I think Zach Martin's one of the most underrated offensive linemen I've ever seen. The fact that he only was 1 year was a second-team All-American by like one outlet in 1 year so undersells how good he was at Notre Dame his last 2 years. So undersells it. So with all due respect to Joe Alt and Ronnie Stanley, I'm going Q and Zach Martin. Now, could that change after the 2023 season? Sure. But what we know, Ronnie Stanley had one really, really good year, and even then he was still inconsistent. Came up like 5 sacks in his All-American year. So I'm going with that duo. And that's an easy one for me. With all due respect, and Ronnie and Joe are great, but Zach Martin and Quentin Nelson arguably are the 2 best offensive linemen Notre Dame has had in the last 10+ years. David Lowe says, are you confident Rudolph will coach the 3-stars up like he stand though? Again, David, can I just watch him coach like one game at Notre Dame first? Like, I don't know. I've given you my opinion on Joe Rudolph already, right? Like, I think he did some nice things at Wisconsin. I don't think he's in the same level Harry Hiestand. I think he's way better than Jeff Quinn. Am I confident? I don't know. How can I be confident if he's never coached a game before? I can tell you that I've come around. I think he did a good job at Wisconsin. Not great, good job at Wisconsin. And he's a guy that people that I know have a great deal of respect for him as a coach. How he treats people is everything I hear is good things. And I've heard he's a good recruiter. I don't love what he's doing so far, but the thing is, though, these guys aren't 3-stars. Like Joe Alt always had the high ceiling. I had him as a 3.5-star player coming out, but he had a 4.5-star upside because the tools were always there. You kind of act like it's like taking these guys with no talent because they're 3-stars and then coaching them and turning them into great players. Though the 3-star part was wrong. That was wrong. And obsessing over stars is wrong. It just is. It's very misguided. Every player needs to be evaluated on an individual basis based on his ability and talent, not what some analyst at some service, and they're getting worse and worse every year, says about a kid. So am I confident he'll do it? I have no idea. I have no idea. Nobody's as good as Harry Hiestand, in my opinion. Can Joe Rudolph be a really good coach? Yes, he can. If he just repeats what he did at Wisconsin, he'll be fine. Because you know what he did at Wisconsin, Ryan? How many of those guys that he put in the NFL were big-time recruits? Ryan did research on I think like 2 of them. Of all the guys he put in the NFL, like maybe 2 of them were 4-star guys. The rest of them were like 2 and 3 stars. And so he did it at Wisconsin, and he's going to be working with a better quality of player at Notre Dame than he did at Wisconsin. At least he better be. So he will be early on. That's for darn sure. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And look, honestly, it's not about the individual players, David. It's how do you get that group of 5 to play together? How many of the guys that Michigan had are going to be first-round draft picks from the last 2 years? Maybe none. I don't think any. But they played great together. And that's what matters. Clemson's offensive line in 2016 didn't have any high draft picks on it. I think Jackson Carman is like, was he a second or third round pick, Ryan? Second round pick. It's the highest drafted guy they had, and he was mediocre in college. He got drafted off tools and reputation, in my opinion. Like their 16 and 18 offensive line, their best linemen were like either undrafted. Mitch Hyatt was an undrafted free agent. He was part of 2 national championship teams at Clemson, I believe. And I think they had a guard that went like the 4th round. Their right tackle was drafted in like the 4th or 5th round. But as a unit, they played really well together. And that's all I care about at the offensive line. Do you play great as a unit? I'll say it to you like this. Ohio State's defensive line and linebackers are going to have a lot more day 1 and day 2 draft picks from the last 2 years than Michigan will have on their offensive line. And Michigan's offensive line kicked their freaking butts both times. Both times. And that's what matters. That's what matters. So let's get to Patrick Tolan. It's been a minute. What up? Who you picking for the Masters? Patrick, I have no clue who's even in the Masters. I am not a golf guy. I watched the only time I've ever watched the Masters was, I think it was my freshman year of college when Tiger won his. And it was like that. Wasn't that the year he won by a ton of strokes, I believe? After that, I don't care about golf. I really don't. I don't know who's in it. I don't know who's still famous golfers. Lid on, please. So I don't know. I can't watch golf. If my wife walked in and I was watching golf, she might smack me upside the back of the head and just wonder what's wrong with me. She's shaking her head now. Like, yep, I would. I can't watch golf. I don't. Now, more respect to you if you do. That's fine. It's just for me personally. I can't watch golf, man. I can't do it. I can't do it. She said it. My wife she's bringing me some tea because my throat's about to go. So she's bringing me some hot tea. She said I'd have you get your head checked. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. Clay Murphy is a Notre Dame fan in college. What game would you pick off the schedule to go to? Okay, so there's a couple different ways to look at this, Clay. Obviously, the easy ones are Ohio State and USC. If you've never been to a Notre Dame game before, you want to get to a Notre Dame USC game. And I know the Ohio State game will be huge. And the reason that you could maybe pick Ohio State is because I don't know when they're going to play Ohio State again. I know they're going to play USC at home again in 2 years, and then in 4 years, and then in 6 years. So they're going to play USC again. You may not get another crack in your lifetime of them playing Ohio State, or at least it's going to be, you're not going to be, you may have kids in college next time. Because if you think about it, the last time Notre Dame played Ohio State in a home and home was the 95, 96 seasons. It's been almost 20 years, right? And so actually it's been over 20 years since the last time they played. It may be that way again, especially with Ohio State joining, now having this huge conference they play in. So, for me, honestly, Clay, I'd say Ohio State, the uniqueness of it. The other part that I would say is USC, because it's the rival. And it's never wrong to go to the first home opener of a season. That's always fun because it's like the first time people are back. You haven't seen them, it's the first team you've seen play at home. So if you were to go to the Tennessee State game, that'd be cool. And here's the other thing about Tennessee State. I have a feeling, and I could be crazy, I have a feeling halftime is going to be legit this year in the Tennessee State Notre Dame game. So that'd be another cool thing. And it's a first. It's like, look, they've never played an FCS team before. And some people don't like that. It's fine. They've never played an HBCU before, which I actually think is pretty cool that they are. I wish they would have played a more prominent HBCU first. If Notre Dame's going to break their FCS schedule because they want to play an HBCU, I would rather it be like a Grambling, a Southern, something, more of a traditional type of team, but Tennessee State's regional, former Ohio State guy there, all that kind of stuff. So I'm fine with it. And from that regard, I don't like the idea of FCS at all, but that's going to be cool. It's going to be memorable. You may want to be at that one. Those are the three that I would say would be at the top of my list at this point in time, Clay. Good question. Timeout Tom says, Brian, is there still plans to offer a magazine? If yes, will it be a compilation of articles from the message board or new content? So still working on that, Tom. I'm not going to promise it this year because I said we are going to do it last year, and I just, for a million reasons, we couldn't get it done. But anytime that that I'm going to do something like that, it will always be new content. What I would do maybe is after the magazine's been out for a while, maybe put that content on the message board, but it'll be new and fresh to the magazine that then maybe goes on the message board. I won't put it up on the website, but that'd definitely be new intel. I'd like to do it. There's just a lot that goes into it. I don't have the team right now to do that. I have people that can produce content, but editing and layout and all that, we're just not there yet. Because right now I'd have to do all that. And I'm not able to. So we're trying. I've been working on it now for a couple months to get a team in place to kind of do a lot of that stuff. We're just not there yet. But we will eventually get to a magazine. And my goal is it'll be digital, all digital, is to have a preseason magazine, a recruiting magazine, and then sort of like a bowl game preview, that type of thing. There's some things like that I'd like to do for the magazine, and they'd all be sold individually. Eventually, maybe we do something where it's like a weekly thing. I don't know if that's the direction I want to go, to be honest with you, or if that would make a lot of sense. I'd rather just stick to the content we're doing now for the site and the message board. But for the big events, bowl games, if they're a playoff game, signing day, and then then obviously preseason, that's stuff that I want to do. And we will have that stuff eventually. I just can't promise that it's going to be this summer, but I'm definitely working on it. And if you're an annual member to Irish Breakdown, you'd get it for free. So that's going to be part of the deal for buying an annual membership is you get access to the and like I got to figure out the delivery system, right? Like how do I sell it where people can purchase it and then just can't put it out for everyone else to see? That kind of thing. So those are the questions that I'm working on. And that's the difficulty of a digital type of magazine in that regard. So we're working on it. Gavin Harden says, how do you think the mentality of coaches has changed over the years from era and Lou to now? And do you feel the evolution from old school coaching to players coach change players' mentality? Big time. And look, I wish there'd be from what we define as a player's coach to the old school Lou Holtz, I'd like to find a happy medium. I think that part of the reason that football coaches need to be more demanding than other sports is because of the physical aspect of the game that requires so much more mental toughness. I mean, there's really not another sport where certain positions are literally punching themselves in the face or headbutting each other on every play, which is basically what linemen do. It's a very violent game. It's a game that absolutely challenges your manhood. And if you're not mentally tough, you're just not going to handle it. I think in general, we're doing a terrible job of teaching young people how to handle adversity in life and sports and all that. We just cater to their weakness. And I think that sucks. And so that's why I still think you're seeing coaches that are demanding, like Kirby is very demanding. Saban, and those are the best teams because those teams handle adversity really well. And I don't know that Lincoln Riley's been able to instill that, to be honest with you, in his teams. There's got to be a happy medium because I watched the Junction Boys that one time and I'm like, this is terrible. Like this is awful. This isn't a good movie. I can't believe they treated players like this. This is disgusting. I hated that movie. But I don't want that. But I also don't what we consider now the way to treat people. I just don't think coddling young people is a way to go. I just don't. You know, I look back now, I didn't like it when my dad was critical of me or demanded that I go out and do this or do that, but he knew I wanted to be great at something and he pushed me towards it. And he didn't accept mediocrity. And I might have liked when I'm 12, but now at 40, I'm so glad he did that when I was a kid. This notion that, you just let kids pick whatever they want to do. They get to, I get to choose to be this or choose to be that. It's absurd. You don't let your kid choose his bedtime, or you shouldn't. You're not going to then let him, do it. No, it's your job it's our job as a society to mold younger people to be able to handle success in life and be able to handle adversity. And we want to get rid of anything that can maybe hurt their feelings, create safe space. It's just a safe space, the stupidest thing in the world because you're making kids soft and that's bleeding into sports way more than it should. But I also don't want to live in a world where crap like the Junction Boys is happening. And so we've got to find that happy medium, to be honest with you, because it's going to be better for young people in life. It's not just about sports. It's about life. And you'll talk to so many New Holtz players who are like, I hated him when I was a coach. Hated him, but I love him now because he helped me become a man. And I'm all about that. I think that's absolutely what we should be doing. Absolutely what we should be doing. And so, like, I helped my sister coach like a junior high girls softball team one year. What I realized is like you got to handle coaching young people way different, and you got to handle coaching girls different than you do college football players, obviously. But at the same time, you saw the girls in that team that just wanted to be coached. They wanted to be challenged, right? Um, and that kind of thing from a coach. So uh, I still think that's ideal. And some kids don't realize they want to be challenged, but they need it. And I don't want us to get too far away from what it used to be, but I don't ever want it to be the way it was a long time ago because that was just insane. To be honest, I'm shocked more kids didn't die. I mean, I really am with some of the stuff that you watch when you watch those kind of shows. Let's get to some more questions here. Zaremba R says, if Notre Dame lands Gearby Lambert, would him and Charles Jagasol be your future tackles? Then Absher would move to guard. I think Absher's going to end up a guard anyway. Could they be your future tackles? Maybe. I don't know if it's a given or not yet. I would hope so, right? Jagasol at right tackle and Gearby Lambert at left tackle. I think that'd be pretty cool. I'd love to see that. So I think that'd be ideal, but I don't think those moves result in Sullivan Absher being a guard. I think that's just going to happen anyway. I just think that's where Sullivan Absher's best position is going to be, in my opinion. Archer 452 is the best singer band from your home area. Being from close to Columbus, I got to go with 21 Pilots. I don't know. Well, if I'm going to use like Lime, Ohio, I don't know of any singers that came out of there. I have no clue. The only really artist that I remember coming out of the Virginia Beach area that I know of, and again, maybe some more came out, is who is the guy that is Missy Elliott's from that area? She's from Portsmouth, I think. But who was the producer on all those, on all the Missy Elliott's and all those? I can't remember who it was, but that guy was from there. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you. Sorry, Archer. Abet ND. Any idea who Notre Dame is strongly considering for the next apparel contract? Would it make sense to split up the uniforms and cleat shoes? Timberland is who it was, by the way. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, but that's about all I know. I don't know who they're strongly considering. I think it would be unwise for Notre Dame to truly leak who they are strongly considering. I think it'd be wise to leak certain things about offers and stuff like that. But um, that way you kind of let people know what the market is and drive the price up. I think that would make a lot of sense. But I mean, I've heard different things. I've heard that they're considering sticking with Under Armour. I've heard they're considering to go to either Nike or the Jordan brand. I've heard Adidas is making a run. I don't know. Honestly, I really don't. I personally, if I could stick with Under Armour from an apparel standpoint and get somebody different for the shoe, I would be all about that. Because I feel like signing 2 contracts is going to give me more money because I can get more for the shoe and then more for that, but maybe not as much from either one of them as I would as one. But getting 2 where I can get a little bit more from you and a little bit more from you, I think would be ideal. So, like, yeah, I'd be all about that because that's the one thing. That's the one big knock I have on Under Armour. There's 2 knocks I have on Under Armour. Number one is they don't make enough of the apparel that people see and would want public. I think that's silly. It's a wasted opportunity. And the other thing, and that might be Notre Dame's fault. I don't know. There may be something in contract to say, hey, we have stuff that's exclusive to us. Maybe I don't know if I can necessarily blame them for that. But I'd like to see more of that. And then the other part of it would be, from everything I've been told, their cleats are terrible. I don't know that firsthand, but that's what I hear. So if you could do that, maybe get, I don't know, Adidas for the shoe or New Balance or somebody that does good shoes, and then get Under Armour for the apparel. That would be ideal for me. I'd like to see that. I like Under Armour apparel. I do. I just heard their cleats are trash. I don't like Adidas a ton, but I'd be open to it. So, yeah, I'd be open to it if they're. I just would want a little bit more control over. I don't want it because like the problem Adidas has, they try to make everything look like cookie cutters. Every team's uniforms with Adidas look the same back in the day. I would want just a little bit more. I'd want to change from that. That's my 2 cents. Chris Govia says, your thoughts on having a sports psychologist on staff? Lorenzo's drops last year seem mental. Chris, I've said this in the past. I absolutely think that sports, the athletic programs should absolutely have mental health specialists because, I talked earlier about, the hard time. Somebody said hard times create hard men. And I've talked before about the need for mental toughness. I'm not some of those people that believes to be mentally tough, you have to bury your feelings down inside and not let them out and be a man. Like being a man means you don't talk about your feelings. I don't. That's the old school crap that I don't believe in. I think you can be tough. You can be hard. You can be someone who overcomes adversity. But you're also need someone. You need somebody to talk to. You need somebody to be able to say, "Hey, I'm struggling with something, and I'm not sure how to handle this, and I can't get out of this funk." As a 40-something-year-old adult, even recently, I've gone through times where I wake up in the morning and everything should be fine. My wife loves me. We've got a roof over our head. I've got a thriving business. I've got this, and I just got a dark cloud over my head. I don't know why. I don't know how to get out of it. And when I'm 44, I have developed methods of okay, battle through it, spend time in prayer, do certain things, stuff like that. But when you're talking about an 18, 19, 20-year old who's dealing with the crap these kids have to deal with on social media, and yes, they shouldn't be on it. That's a different animal. Uh, you deal with the stuff that they're dealing with their sport, the demands of their sport, the being pulled in all these directions with NIL and transfers and all this other kind of stuff. And then they've got the normal teenager problems they have to deal with, girlfriends breaking up with them, fights with their friends, parents are going through something. And these kids have so much on them that I never dreamed of having to deal with as an 18, 19, 20-year-old. There should absolutely be people beyond their football staff that are there to say, hey, we're here to help you uh, handle all these things and sometimes however that's going to be, sometimes it's to challenge them, sometimes just to let them talk, whatever the case may be. I believe in that kind of stuff. I wish we did more for our troops when they come home from certain. We should absolutely be doing more and more and more and more to help our troops that are coming home from war, right? That's a big thing, to help these young student athletes. That one of the toughest things student athletes are going to ever experience is the minute they are no longer an athlete or like a part of a team. So like all the kids that aren't going to be playing in the NFL, that is a hard adjustment. And there's nobody to really help them with that process. And so I really wish there was more for that. That's something I would do for all the sports. I would do all that stuff. And Notre Dame should be setting the trend for that. That's just the thing that frustrates me is you don't want to pay NIL stuff, whatever, fine. I don't care about that. You don't want to get into this bidding war of this thing. That's fine. But when it comes to stuff like this, and I've railed about this before, when it comes to stuff like this, when this is truly about building up young people, and it's not just football, it's basketball, it's women's sports, men's sports, all of it. When you do stuff like that, you're now setting the tone for we're going to do this the right way. Of course, there's always concerns that you hire someone who sucks at their job or has agendas or whatever, but that's part of the vetting process of hiring someone who truly cares about building up young people in those different ways. And so I absolutely think that should be something that Notre Dame takes great pride in and invests the money in to have that. And it's not just like one sports psychologist for all the sports. It's a team of them that handle the different sports. And sometimes you may have one that handles multiple sports because the rosters are really small. And you have one for just football or a football and a staff because it's so many people. But I would have a team of that. And Notre Dame should be trendsetters in that regard, flat out trendsetters in that regard. They're not. And that's disappointing. But that's something I would love to see Notre Dame do. Absolutely. And I don't care about, okay, I need you to help Lorenzo not drop the football anymore. I don't care about that. But if let's just say that it all stems from this issue that's built around this thing over here. I care about helping him deal with that thing. And if the byproduct is he's not dropping the ball anymore, great. But that's not my end game. My end game is this is a kid that is struggling with, we saw it with the Helinski kid that committed suicide. So tragic. And I'm not saying anybody dropped the ball. I don't know what happened there, but like you'd be surprised how many kids have those thoughts because it's just they're overwhelmed and they don't have anywhere to go. And there's two different sides to being a man. One is to be unnecessarily sensitive, and the other is suck it up and be a man. I don't think either one of them help. And everybody's different. And you just wish that there was more like that available to these young people to be able to help them become better people and to work through these things. So yes, Chris, I would love to have that. And if the byproduct is the football product is better, great. but it's not the end game. The end game is we're trying to help develop and strengthen young people to be the best versions of themselves. At a place like Notre Dame, the cool thing about that is you should be able to make faith a part of that because you're a Catholic institution. Faith should be a part of that. I understand that you may not be able to do that at certain public schools, but at Notre Dame, it should be a part of that. Because for me personally, I don't think you can be the best version of yourself without God. That's my personal opinion. It doesn't mean that you're in there. Okay, I'm having trouble with my girlfriend back home. Okay, let's dive into the gospel and okay, that doesn't really help me. Like it's about faith and leading me to faith, perhaps, but it's just like there's a right and a wrong way to do that, in my opinion. But yes, Notre Dame should flat out be trendsetters when it comes to stuff like this, 100%. And there's no excuse not to. And I'd like to see them do that. Archer says, what is the single best sports logo, either classic or current? I'm biased on this, but I thought the Denver Bronco D back in the day was awesome. And that's just me. I loved that. And then, of course, there's the interlocking ND. I think those are the two best, but I'm biased. I think those are my favorites, to be honest with you. Those are mine. Oh, you know what else one I liked? I liked the old school Patriots one. Back in the day, the old Patriots one, like from back with the white helmets with the guy snapping. That's pretty cool. That's one of my favorites as well. And anybody that knows me understands why. But I thought that one was a pretty cool. Pretty cool. It was like when the Patriots go to those old school throwbacks, I love those. Absolutely love those. Richard Meredith, who will have more passing yards, Tyler Buckner at Notre Dame or Drew Pine at Arizona State? Well, in 2023, probably a good chance Drew does because Drew might be the starter at Arizona State. I don't know how much Tyler's going to play. Who's going to pass for more over the next couple of years? Tyler. Tyler's a better player than Drew Pine. So that's just the reality of it. But I don't know if he's going to necessarily start this year. So I probably lean towards Drew Pine. But I don't know if Drew Pine's going to start. I just don't know enough about the Arizona State quarterback battle to know if Drew Pine's going to end up being the starter for that football team. We are not Marshall. Brian, your thoughts on Jason Onye? Last year you talked about the physical tools. Is he learning at a quick enough pace to provide quality snaps to the D-line? So we've talked about this. I think you were out for a few weeks, or we are not Marshall. But we've talked about Jason Onye quite a bit this spring. I've heard a lot of good things about him from sources. And then we saw him look really good in the practice we saw. In the other two practices, I thought he looked really quick and explosive moving through drills, which I was keeping an eye on because he put on a lot of weight, and I wanted to see if he can handle it. He was over 290 now. He looked quick, moving around really well, had a really good practice session that we saw. Still needs to be more assignment correct, but he's getting there. He's definitely getting there. He's had a really good spring. And then I talked to sources, and they tell me the same thing. He really looks good. So I'm very cautiously optimistic that Jason's going to be a very key member of the rotation. Like, look, like we had this thing. Somebody, I think there's a misconception about the Notre Dame talent that they have, and I think they have a lot of talent. It's just unproven. And no matter what metric you use, if you're someone who's a recruiting rankings person, 13 of Notre Dame's defensive linemen on scholarship this year were composite, or when I say composite 4-star recruits on 247. And I think like 6 of them are ranked as top 100 recruits by somebody. Now, again, I'm not a recruiting person. I'm saying for those who are a recruiting person, I'm talking about the film. There's a lot of talent coming back as well. It's just, do they step up? Does Gabriel Rubio start tapping into his full potential? Does Jason Onye do that? Does Riley Mills break out and become more consistent? I mean, there's so many question marks, but the talent's there. There's a lot of talent for this defensive line. There really is. It's very unproven. So it's hard for me to say they're definitely going to be there. But for me, Jason Onye is a big part of that. Him cracking a rotation spot this year is a big part. If he can become the disruptive player in games that we've seen from him in practice so far, the D line's going to have a chance to be pretty good. Definitely has a chance to be pretty good. Siggy 13 says, what conference gets the 20 teams first? Does it happen before a bigger change happens? I think it's going to be the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten's going to fight hard to try to get 2 more teams into their league. So that's where I'm going with it. I'm going to go Big Ten. And I am not going to like it. Chris Govia, EA Sports NCAA football rating for Chris Tyree's hands, asking for a friend. I don't know. I mean, would like 80 be good? I don't remember. I mean, he's solid. You just don't throw it too high, and don't make him win a lot of contested throws. That would be mine. But if you hit him in his zone, he's going to catch it. He's not going to have great hands, but it's adequate. It's adequate, and sometimes good. Just depends on the kind of route you're looking at. Let's get to some more here. Did you get a chance to watch Logan Diggs' mic'd up video? Pretty cool ending. Do you think indie media has done a better job highlighting players, coaches with their current recent mic'd up videos? It's fine. It's fine. It's a. I'll tell you this. It's a step in the right direction. We talked this offseason. This is something they should do after every practice, and it's fine. I like that they're doing it with coaches and players. I wish they would do it maybe with some players that are practicing. That'd be pretty cool. But no, it's fine. It's fine. It was good. The ending was good. Talking about Sam throwing that ball, and somebody made um, uh, somebody made a great catch. I couldn't really see it at the very end, but yeah, I mean that was fun. That was fun. And it's given Logan exposure, right? I would wish they'd be a little bit longer, but yeah, that's fine. It's a good step in the right direction. It is. I'll give them credit for that. And that's something we've called for them to do. So I'm glad that they're doing it. And now it's about build. It's like with our show. When our show first started, you look at what our show was when it started to now, and what I hope it's going to be in 5 years. It's going to look way different. You just got to start somewhere. And I'm kudos to them for starting somewhere. I wish they would do more practice highlights, but baby steps, I guess. Adam Blair's to start a franchise with LT or Reggie White. I'm a 4-down guy, so I'd probably say Reggie White. I mean, you give me a big power end. I mean, Reggie was a monster. Plus, with all due respect, I feel like Reggie is going to have a little bit more. Reggie's going to be a little bit more responsible off the field than LT was. So that's going to factor into it as well. So I'd probably go Reggie White. But look, this is one of those ones, man, there's not a wrong answer. There's not a wrong answer. If you're a 3-4 team, it's going to be – it's like in Notre Dame's defense, I'd probably take Reggie White. In Alabama's defense, I'd probably take Lawrence Taylor. Just put him where Will Anderson does and just say, go sack the quarterback. You can put Lawrence Taylor where Isaiah Foskey was too, and he'd be a monster. But if I had a dominant big end, that's going to make my defense so hard to beat. But again, it's personal preference. It's not a wrong answer on that one, in my opinion. All right, we're getting kind of close to the end here. This is good. My throat is about to go. Jay Henry asks, who do you think is the most overrated player coming into the 23 season? I'm going to assume, Jay, we're talking nationally in this regard. Ooh, boy. Let's see. 2020 most overrated player in college football coming into 2023. Well, I want to say Marvin Harrison Jr. just to piss off Archer, but that's not true. He's really good. I just want to get Archer fired up a little bit today. I want to say JJ McCarthy just to get my guy Antoine fired up. My Michigan fan, so I want to say him too. But I that's just more about getting guys fired up. If I had to say, boy, it's a good one. I'd probably somebody just said in their Joe Milton. I don't know if I don't know. So I call him overrated. Nice comeback, Archer. Well played, my friend. Archer said Sam Hartman. Well played. Well played. I deserve that one. A lot of the most overrated guys I think are gone. I do think our house has a couple overrated guys on defense. I do think JJ McCarthy actually is a little bit overrated. Archie Manning. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if maybe Arch Manning, but I think that's a little unfair. I don't know if I'd say Joe Milton because I don't know how much hype Joe Milton's getting. It's not like he's getting All-American honors. Part of me wants to say Xavier Worthy because I saw that he was a second-team All-American this year. And the way he played last year, Xavier does not belong on second-team All-American list the way he played last year. I know he was very good as a freshman, but he, in my opinion, was not very good last year. And so being a second-team All-American, I think that's a little bit overrated. He's got the talent to be there, though. I think he's got the talent to be that kind of guy. I just think right now he's got a lot to prove, in my opinion. So, those would be guys I'd probably go with. I think Braylon Allen, I saw he's a second-team All-American. I know Braylon Allen produces numbers. I get that. He does. But I think it's more system-driven. I've just never been necessarily blown away with him as a player. If you had to say, hey, who'd you rather have on your team, Braylon Allen or Audric Estime, I'd take Audric Estime. I would. Maybe that's my bias, but somebody said Jackson Dart. I don't think Jackson Dart's rated real high. I mean, literally Ole Miss went out and got like 2 quarterbacks in the portal trying to get Jackson Dart to move on. in my opinion. So, yeah, those are ones. But a lot of the overhyped guys that I thought in last are gone now. They're off to the NFL now. So that'll be an interesting one. Yeah. So some of the guys that people mention, I don't think are really getting a lot of hype. David Lowe says, Brian, would you rather have Christian Gray as a good safety or elite corner? Always an elite corner. Always. And I don't think Christian Gray, fair question, David. That's an easy one. Give me an elite corner over, because Ryan, I'm curious if you agree with this. Ryan's down. I would give me an elite corner and two good safeties with a really good front seven, and I'm going to have an elite defense, as opposed to, to a really, same D line and just good corners and a great safety. That's going to be a good defense too, but I'd rather have, because the corners I got to put out on an island more. There's no position in football that's on an island more than corners, and especially if you're a man team like Notre Dame. You give me an elite corner, I'm gonna be really good on defense. If I'm, as long as the rest is pretty good. But yeah, if I got two pretty good safeties, just good safeties and elite corners, I'm loving that. I'm loving that. That's a great scenario for me from a secondary standpoint. No question. Somebody asked we're talking about overrated. Somebody said, how about Harold Perkins? I didn't see much LSU last year. If you look at what Harold Perkins did the second half of the year, he was pretty darn good. So he's getting second team All-American preseason lists. I saw, I think second team. No, first team. Was he first team? Am I ready to put him on the first team just yet? Maybe not, but I'm not going to argue that too much. He's incredibly talented and had a really good first year, especially late in down the stretch. He got so much better late in the year. So I'm good with that one. I'm good with that. I'm good with the hype for Harold Perkins. I think that's valid. I mean, we can nitpick, should he be first team or second team? I mean, that'd be an argument, but he's really talented. So if somebody wants to project him to first team preseason, I'm fine with that. I don't think I wouldn't put him in an overrated category at all. I think he's really good. And I'm also curious how he's going to do. Matt House is now in year two of his defense. Is he going to be able to get that group better? That's a good question mark, because they were not very good on defense last year. But Harold Perkins is really talented, like really talented. We got a few more here. J.P. Buellsfeld said Rick Neuheisel states on ESPN radio show many times he accepted the job in 2004 before Charlie Weiss, but then changed his mind 24 hours later. True or not? I don't know the answer to that from the Notre Dame side. I've never had anyone talk to me about that in one way or the other. I doubt that Rick Neuheisel would say that publicly as often as he apparently does. I don't listen to Rick Neuheisel. If there wasn't truth to that, because it'd just be so easy for some Notre Dame to say this guy's full of it. So I don't. Now, so I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. But I don't know why he would lie about it. So, but JP, I just have never heard one way or the other. So I can't really answer that question. It's going from Antoine Johnson. Brian, with college football expanding soon, I think the main priority for college teams should be depth and being strategic in your recruiting. People don't get it, but remaining healthy will be important. What you think? You're talking about the postseason. I think so. I mean, in order to win a title, sometimes you got to win 4 games. Yeah, you need depth, man. You really do, Antoine. I think it's a good point. And it just comes down to, it's good to recruit the top level guys, but you've got to recruit depth, man. You're going to have more injuries. You're going to have to play more guys during the season. You got to make sure that when you're rotating D linemen, secondary guys, receivers, running backs, that you're not having a big drop off. So I think we're being really good at recruiting good depth players and here's a big thing, Antoine, in this stupid portal era, you got to make sure your program is such that you're recruiting guys that are going to battle through adversity, guys that are not just going to, if they don't like I remember who was that linebacker from Nebraska? He's part of the, he ended up signing like Arizona State or something like that. But I remember talking to him and he was like, yeah, he was at the time he liked Notre Dame a lot. I thought he was a little overrated. I think he was very athletic, but a little overrated. But he said something to me at an event. He was in the 22 class. And he said something to me at an event where he's like, yeah, I'm going to go somewhere and somewhere, if I don't play within the first 2 years, I'm leaving. I'm like, if I had a kid say that to me, I'd stop recruiting him. Like literally I'd stop recruiting him because I don't want that kind of guy. So if things don't go your way right away, you're going to leave. Give me a break. So I have to share with y'all what I'm watching right now. So it's absolutely hilarious. So Ryan's daughter's home and she's treating him like a jungle gym right now, which is absolutely, he's trying to bring questions up and she's climbing all over him. It's so funny. She's adorable. So that's what Ryan is dealing with right now. So it's just absolutely hilarious. So I got a big kick out of that. So I'm trying to answer this question as I'm watching Jules just like climb all over Ryan and put him in a chokehold. It was great. Hi, Jules. So that was a lot of fun. All right, let's get to some more questions here as we get close to wrapping up. But yeah, Antoine, you're absolutely right. Depth is going to be so important. Ray Holcraft says, "What are the key traits you look for in a nickel DB and field side and boundary corner? What does each position need?" That's a good question, Ray. So I'll start with kind of work boundary over. A boundary corner to me has to be a guy that is a pure cover guy. He's got to be rangy. He's got to be able to play over the top. He's got to be able to cover down the field. He has to have enough physicality to be able to handle some of the more physical routes, the comebacks, the stops, the back shoulders. There's got to be some physicality to that that I think is important, that I think you need. He's got to be a guy that's fluid. I believe to be the best. You can get away with it if if he's long or whatever. There's got to be some length to that guy. He's got to be a pretty decent tackler, point of attack tackler, and he's got to be, like I said, really good man coverage, because he's going to have a lot more not reps where he's not getting help. A field corner's got to be rangy. A field corner has to, he's playing the field. There's a lot more ground to cover. You've got to be able to play zone effectively there. You've got to be able to play man, but you're running a lot. You've got to cover man in a lot more room. You got to be a guy, in my opinion, in most teams, you got to be a good downhill player, meaning you got to be able to come up and take on blocks, blow up bubble screens, blow up perimeter screens. If you're a soft field corner, you better be playing like cover one and having some other answers, because I'm going to screen game you and perimeter run you all day, because your corner, I'm just going to blow up your corner, and I know I'm going to be able to get some positive yards. So you've got to be a guy that can come up and take on the run. There's got to be a level of you got to be able to run, period. I think there's a lot of ground to cover as a field corner. A nickel corner, to me, is a very unique position in today's era. Obviously, you got to be able to play man. You got to be able to run with people. You got to be a smart player. You got to know when to work over top of a pick play, when to work underneath certain concepts. You've got to be a guy that can run and cover, but also someone who's physical enough to come up and also take on blocks and make plays. So there's a lot more similarities between the field and the nickel than there are between the boundary. But I think you can get away with not being as big, like as long as a nickel, depending on what coverages you're in. But even then, there's some concerns where if you're a nickel team playing single high, I might be able to get some seam stuff against you if you're not long enough. But I think all of them have to be able to tackle, but there's a level of physicality taken on blocks that's especially needed with the two field positions, which is nickel and outside corner, that I think are there. And I think an outside cornerback also has to be a guy that's very instinctive. He's got to be able to, because you're going to double move more of that side of the field. You're going to do things to try to create, fake a bubble and run a go. You got to be a really instinctive player to be a field corner as well. And I think there's a level of football IQ that's needed there as well that has to be pretty good. All right, next one is from Tyler Misguided Passion Bench. I love that name, by the way. Thoughts on teams retroactively getting themselves championships in the years where multiple teams claim championships? I think that's lame. I think that's extremely lame. I think there should be a set standard for what's considered a champion, and everyone should live by that. The fact that certain teams declare champions one way and the others another way is just something that drives me absolutely freaking nuts. I think that's just really stupid. Like, didn't Texas A&M do that recently? It's just lame. It's really lame, but it's not a surprise. It's all a recruiting tool, in my opinion. All right, let's go to Chief Brody. How bad were the Marshall and Stanford losses in hindsight? Well, the Marshall loss is not as bad as I think people make it out to be for two reasons. Number one is Marshall's a pretty good team last year. There's no excuse for the loss. It's not. I'm not trying to justify the loss. I'm just saying Marshall's a pretty good team, and it was game two. If you run the table the rest of the year, and your only losses to USC, we're not looking at that Marshall game as bad, in my opinion. The Stanford one is the one that really hurts, because they were not good. They were just a bad football team, and there was no excuse. There was no excuse for either, but the Stanford game was worse to me than Marshall. But, hindsight, how bad were they? They were bad losses, but I also don't want to overreact to it. I mean, Georgia recently lost to a 4-8 South Carolina team. The 2017 season, Clemson goes to the college football playoff. They lost to a 4-8 Syracuse team. Like, we need to not overreact to this stuff too much. It's bad losses. But Notre Dame bounced back pretty well from those and finished strong. So I don't think there's no lingering side effects of those games anymore. But at the time, they were bad. They were not good. And last couple here, we've got from Scott L. This is one of two. On National Signing Day, Marcus Freeman said, getting players to commit ASAP is vital as anything else in the recruiting process. The sooner they commit, the better chance the Irish have of signing them. Part two is, Do you agree or disagree? Why? If it isn't the opposite true. Once a talented recruit commits, it allows other schools to programs to recruit against Notre Dame. Well, Scott, it's a good question. I somewhat agree, but also somewhat disagree. And I think I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly with what he's saying, but I do agree with what Notre Dame is doing. There have been several players in the 24 class that have tried to commit to Notre Dame, but they wanted to take visits. And Notre Dame has basically said, that's fine, take visits, but we're not going to take your commitment right now. Just see it through, because I think they understand the impact of getting committed from these kids and then losing them. A perfect example is the perception of the 23 class is not as great as the talent in the 23 class. Why? Because the perception is bad because they lost Keon Keeley, they lost Peyton Bowen, they lost Dylan Edwards. And so there's a perception that it was not as good of a class as it should have been. They lost Brandon Hillman. And that's true. It's not as good as it should have been, but it's still a really good class. If you never would have had commitments from those players, I think the perception of this class would be very different. And people would be much higher on it. And I think that matters. Perception matters. I wish it didn't, but it does. And so it has to depend on the player. There are some players it's like, look, just get them in the class and then fend everybody off. That's the approach you got to take. But with other players, it's like, I don't know if I want to get I need to know the kid well enough to know, are we just this is what I felt about Amorian Walker. I kind of felt like from the minute he committed, they were always like, okay, I'll go to them unless I get something better. You got to know kids well enough to know that that's not the case. And sometimes if you're not really in a strong relationship with a kid and you don't really know who he is yet and he wants to commit and you're still new to that recruitment, don't take it, because that's where you may get burned. Really develop the relationship, and then that's also requires you to get on kids earlier. And if you're able to, and you say, I'm confident we may lose them, but I'm pretty confident this kid wants to be here, then I'm okay taking that early, because in a lot of instances, everybody may say, hey, we know who to beat now and we know who to go against, and that's fine. But they're going to know if Notre Dame's the leader or not, and they're going to beat up Notre Dame anyway. So it's easier to get a kid to it's harder for a kid to decommit and go somewhere else than it is to win that battle if you're on the same plane as everybody else. So in most instances, I'd rather have a kid commit. But what I wouldn't do ever in any circumstance is take a commitment from a kid who still flat out tells you he's going to take more visits. There's no need for that, because I'd rather lose him in 2 months after the visits and no one knew that we had him than to get a public commitment and then go through the process of the decommitment because he visited Georgia and Bama or Ohio State or whatever. So it varies kid to kid, honestly, Scott. And I think that's kind of where I look at it, and I figure, again, it just depends on the kid. But if a kid's ready to lock his recruitment down and not take visits, and you feel comfortable knowing who this kid is and his support system at home, I'd take the commitment. And knowing that some of those kids are going to choose to leave. There's just part of the business. The only part of it that I would disagree with Coach on, and I think it's disagreeing with what he said, but I think he didn't get into all of it, is the kid's kids right now that are telling Notre Dame they're going to take visits that want to commit, they're not taking commitments from. I'm on board with that. Flat out on board with what they're doing in that regard. And it means that they haven't landed a couple commits that they might have landed. Maybe they'd have kept those kids, maybe not. But for example, there's one kid that I don't think they're going to get that basically committed to them, but they wouldn't let him go public because exactly what's going on now. I don't think they're going to get the kid. And so I think that's something that Notre Dame needs to avoid. They don't want to get into that. And that's where we're at. So good question, Scott. Really good question. So folks, that's going to do it for today's show. So many great questions today. I want to appreciate y'all very much for just come and being with us today, for kind of did a little bit of a solo show today. So I appreciate that. Before we get out of here, remember, hit that like button, folks. Subscribe to the channel. Also, if you haven't done so already, I ask y'all to do us a favor. Subscribe to the CFB Nation YouTube channel. Subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast channel. We're not doing a lot with the YouTube channel yet, but we are working on a lot of things. We're going to have a plan for that. We're going to really get into that over the summer, especially. We're going to eventually take all the shows on the podcast channel and off of the IB Nation feed and put them onto just their channel by themselves. So if you like the content that we're doing on CFB Nation, so that's the Lucky Lefty show, the CFB All America, Ryan's Rise and Draft show. I'm gonna have a couple shows that I'm gonna do. I don't know if they're gonna start this summer or into the fall. That'll only be on CFB Nation. So you're going to do that. We're looking for some recruiting help on CFB Nation on there as well. So there's a lot of stuff that are we're going to have for that. But you need to go subscribe to that now. We would greatly appreciate that so we can kind of transition that over, which is then going to help us build that channel up even more. So if you like listening to those shows, please subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast app. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, all those. It's the red, white, and blue logo. There is some other CFB Nation channel that I don't think is active anymore, but it's got a different logo. Ours is the red, white, and blue CFB Nation logo. So definitely check that out. And of course, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Have an awesome weekend, and we'll talk to you all again soon on Monday, in fact, on the Irish Breakdown podcast.